Hey guys, tonight we are wading into the cold, grim reality of medieval warfare. Forget the shining armor and the fluttering banners you've seen in the movies. Instead, picture the mud. It's cold and thick, seeping through your thin leather boots. The armor you've been given is a greasy, padded jacket that stinks of sweat and fear. And the only helmet you have is a rusty iron pot that sits crookedly on your head. This isn't a story of knights and glory, it's a story of survival. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're down there, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Post your city or country and the local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun is warm on the back of your neck. You feel it through the thin, worn linen of your tunic as you bend over the furrow. The smell is one you've known your entire life, a rich, deep scent of turned earth, damp and full of promise. It's a quiet sort of day. The only sounds are the gentle rustle of leaves from the woods at the edge of the field, the distant rhythmic clang of the village blacksmith, and the soft, tired breathing in your own chest. Your hands are rough, the palms and fingers mapped with calluses from the wooden handle of your hoe. This is your world. It is not large, it is not grand, but it is known. Every rise and fall of this land is as familiar to you as the lines on your own hand. You are not thinking of kings, or of kingdoms, or of the grand tides of history. You're thinking about the coming rain, and whether the roof of your small cottage will hold against it for another season. And then a new sound intrudes. It's the plodding hoofbeat of a horse, moving with a weary sort of purpose along the track that borders your strip of land. You don't look up immediately. A horse is an expensive, precious thing, usually a sign of someone important, and important people rarely bring good news. You continue your work, hoping, perhaps, they will simply pass by. But the hoofbeats slow, and then stop. A shadow falls over you. You straighten up slowly, your back protesting with a dull ache. There is a man on a horse looking down at you. He is not a knight. There is no shining armor, no silken banner. He is a reeve, a local official, his face weary and his clothes dusty from travel. He holds a small, rolled piece of parchment in his hand, sealed with a smear of colored wax. He does not greet you. He does not ask your name. He already knows it. He knows it because you exist in a ledger somewhere, a name tied to this specific plot of land, which is tied to a local lord, who is in turn tied to a greater duke, who has been summoned by the king. You are the final, smallest link in a very long chain of obligation. He extends the parchment down to you. By order of the Earl, he says, his voice flat. Your service is required. Muster at the crossroads in 3 days' time. You take the document. The parchment feels alien in your rough hands, impossibly smooth and official. You can't read the swirling, elegant script, but you don't need to. You understand the message perfectly. This is not an invitation. This is a tax, to be paid not in grain or coin, but in body and in time. Historians of the future will give it formal names, like a feudal levy or a summons to the feared. But for you, it is simply a sudden, unwelcome turning of your life's path. It is the rude hand of a distant, powerful man reaching into your quiet world and pulling you out of it. The reeve doesn't wait for an answer. He has other notices to deliver, other lives to disrupt. He turns his horse and plods away, leaving you alone in the field. The sun's still warm, the earth still smelling of home, but with everything somehow changed. There is a new, cold knot in your stomach. Your great adventure is about to begin, and you already wish it were over. 3 days later, you stand in a muddy, churned-up field at the crossroads, alongside 100 other men who look just as bewildered and unhappy as you feel. They are weavers, farmers, potters, and sons of men who hold a little more land than you do. The air buzzes with low murmurs, a collective sigh of resentment. There is no soaring speech about glory or defending the realm. There is just waiting. And then distribution. This is the moment where you are given the tools of your new trade. You imagine perhaps a sword, a shield, something that looks like it belongs to a soldier. What you receive is less inspiring. You are shoved into a line that shuffles towards a large, grimy tent. Inside, men are pulling items from large wooden chests and barrels. When it is your turn, a man with a scarred face and one missing ear looks you up and down, grunts, and tosses a collection of mismatched items at your feet. This is your armor. First, there is the gambazon. It's a thick, padded jacket stuffed with layers of wool and scrap cloth and stitched in tight vertical lines. It is designed to absorb the force of a blow, and it is perhaps the most useful thing you will be given. It is also greasy, stiff with old sweat, and smells faintly of mildew and a man you will never know. You pull it on, and it feels like wearing a heavy, damp blanket. Next comes the head protection. It is not a gleaming helmet. It is a rusty iron cap, a simple bowl of metal with a wide brim, looking rather like a cooking pot someone has repurposed. It sits crookedly on your head, and the old leather lining inside is cracked and flaking. The chin strap is gone, so it wobbles with every movement. You now have a splitting headache, a fashionable side effect of your new headwear. For a weapon, you are handed a spear. The wooden shaft is rough and splintery, and the small iron head on its tip is pitted with rust. You are also given a knife, a simple, brutish-looking tool that is probably more useful for cutting your bread than for anything else. There are no swords for men like you. Swords are expensive. You are not. As a quirky little bonus, some men are issued pieces of cuir bouilli, leather that has been boiled in water or wax until it is hard. It looks vaguely like real armor from a distance if you squint, but you suspect a good hard poke would probably go right through it. It is the medieval equivalent of a participation trophy. You, however, are not so lucky. Your sole piece of body armor is the musty gambazon. You are now a soldier. You feel less protected than you did in your field, with only a hoe in your hands. The last part of your new life is the march itself. The column of men stretches out along the muddy road, a great shuffling serpent of misery. You are no longer an individual. You are part of a shuffling, clanking, coughing mass. The first day there might be some nervous chatter, some feeble attempts at camaraderie. This fades quickly. Soon the only sounds are the squelch of 1,000 boots in the mud, the creak of leather, the rhythmic clink of cheap iron, and the low, constant murmur of complaint. Your world shrinks to the few feet in front of you. The back of the man ahead, his shoulders slumped in the same weary way as yours. Your own body becomes a source of constant, low-grade misery. The gambazon, which was merely uncomfortable at the start, now chafes your skin raw at the neck and under the arms. Your shoes, not made for this kind of journey, have already begun to raise blisters on your heels. A small stone has worked its way inside one of them, but there is no time to stop, no place to sit and fix it. You just walk, and with every step, it grinds a little deeper. Hunger becomes a constant companion. You are given rations, of course, a piece of hard, dense bread and a chunk of salted, greasy bacon that you chew on for what seems like an hour. But it is never enough. You feel a hollow ache in your belly that water from your canteen cannot fill, and the water itself is a gamble, scooped from streams and wells along the way, sometimes clear, sometimes murky. Already men are beginning to suffer from stomach cramps and dysentery, a foe far more deadly than any you are marching to face. Historians will later argue about the precise ratio of combat to non-combat casualties in medieval armies, but you are learning the grim reality firsthand. The greatest killer on any campaign is the campaign itself. Sickness moves through the ranks like a whisper, and every morning a few more men simply do not have the strength to get up and continue. You just keep walking, trying not to think about it, trying not to think about home, focusing only on putting one foot in front of the other. The grand, epic sweep of warfare has, for you, been reduced to the simple, miserable task of enduring. The landscape has been changing for the last day, growing more trampled and torn. The road widens, churned into a brown soup by thousands of feet and iron-shod wheels. And then, a new smell reaches you, overpowering the familiar sense of mud and wet wool. It's the smell of a city, but a city with none of the comforting familiarity of your own village. It is the dense, complex odor of thousands of living beings crammed together without care or consequence. Wood smoke, roasting meat, stale beer, unwashed bodies, and underlying it all, a faint, foul tang of sickness and waste that clings to the back of your throat. A new sound, too, a low, continuous roar, like a distant waterfall, that resolves itself as you get closer into a tapestry of human noise. Shouting, laughing, arguing, the clang of a hammer on an anvil, the whinny of horses, the bleating of sheep destined for the pot. Finally, you crest a low rise, and there it is. Your new home. It is not a neat, orderly camp of bright white tents as you might have imagined. It is a sprawling, chaotic metropolis of grime and desperation, sprawling across the valley floor. It is a city made of canvas, old sailcloth, animal hides, and crude shelters of woven branches and mud. In the distance, rising from the center of this squalor, you can see the grand, colorful pavilions of the knights and nobles, their silk banners limp in the damp air. But where you are headed is the periphery, the slums of this temporary world. You and the other men from your village are simply pointed toward an open patch of ground, still marshy from a recent rain. There are no tents for you. You have the clothes on your back, the thin wool blanket you were encouraged to bring, and your new, disappointing spear. Together with the men you now know only by their first name and the nature of their persistent cough, you rig a pitiful shelter. You drive your spears into the soft earth and drape a shared blanket over them, creating a sagging roof that will do little more than concentrate the rainwater into a single, irritating drip. This is your home now. You have traded your warm, dry cottage for a patch of mud under a wet wool rag. Your only real estate is the few feet of ground you can claim before another man's space begins. Privacy is a forgotten luxury. You will sleep, eat, and shiver pressed against strangers. And then the waiting begins. The slow, grinding reality of a siege settles over you. The grand charge you may have feared or even secretly anticipated does not happen. Your enemy is not a charging knight, but boredom itself. The days stretch into a seemingly endless series of menial tasks, punctuated by periods of utter inactivity. Your primary job becomes digging. The army has an insatiable need for ditches. You dig defensive trenches around the camp's perimeter, and most importantly, you dig latrines. These are long, deep pits at the edge of the camp, and the smell that rises from them is a truly innovative assault on your senses. You're certain that if you could bottle it, it would be an effective siege weapon in its own right. A few old timbers are thrown across the top, and that is the extent of the camp's sanitation. You quickly learn to check the wind direction before you choose a place to rest. Disease, you realize, is not some abstract threat. It is born in these pits. It travels on the flies that swarm there, on the hands that are never properly washed, in the water that seeps into the ground. Between these bouts of labor, there is nothing to do. You huddle with the other men, sharpening your rusty spearhead on a rock for the 10th time, re-stitching a tear in your stinking gambazon. Men gamble using dice carved from animal bone, wagering buttons or the slim hope of a future coin. It is here that you learn about the informal economy of the camp, a quirky tidbit of your new life. Women, wives, laundresses, brewers have followed the army, setting up shop. You can buy a crust of bread, a cup of ale, or have your tunic mended, all for prices that make your eyes water. This camp is a fully functioning, foul-smelling society, a microcosm of the world you left behind, only with more mud and less hope. This moving city of soldiers and support staff is a standard feature of any major campaign. A well-supplied army is an army that can continue to function, and the logistics of feeding and maintaining you are a far greater concern to your commanders than any tactical plan. Then one day you are assigned a new, more prestigious role. You are part of a trebuchet crew. The word itself sounds impressive, a name full of power and destructive fury. The reality, you discover, is just a different kind of back-breaking labor. The great machine is a monstrous skeleton of wood, a complex web of timbers and rope. It does not look elegant, it looks brutish and clumsy. Your job has nothing to do with aiming this behemoth. Your job is to help it function. A dozen of you are put to work on the winch, a massive hamster wheel for humans. You step inside the twin wooden wheels and you walk, and walk, and walk. The great throwing arm of the trebuchet, hundreds of pounds of wood and iron, slowly, agonizingly rises into the air as you collectively turn the winding drum. The wood creaks and groans in protest. Every step is a strain against the immense weight. Sweat pours into your eyes. Your thighs burn. You focus only on the back of the man in front of you, on keeping the rhythm, terrified of what might happen if the pole slips. And all that tension is released at once. Scholars of a later age will debate the primary purpose of siege engines, whether they were intended more for physical destruction or for the demoralizing psychological impact of their relentless bombardment. For you, the purpose is clear: to make your muscles scream in protest for hours on end. When the arm is finally cocked and locked, your work is not done. Now, you must fetch the ammunition. You and several others are sent to haul stones from a designated pile. These are not neat, round cannonballs. They are rough, jagged rocks, some as large as your own head. You lug them to the sling, your fingers scraped and your back aching. Sometimes, as a form of particularly grim humor, the nobles will command that other things be thrown. Dead animals, their bodies swollen with gas, or worse, the occasional prisoner or messenger sent back to the castle in the most emphatic way possible. You try not to watch when this happens. Other days you are assigned to a battering ram. This is an even more intimate and unpleasant task. The ram is a colossal log, capped with an iron head, suspended by chains within a heavy wooden shed on wheels. They call this shed a cat or a sow, a protective roof to shield the operators. You are one of the men who has to push this ponderous beast across the broken ground, slowly, foot by agonizing foot, towards the castle gate. All the while, the defenders on the walls are throwing things down at your little wooden roof. Rocks clang against the timber, arrows thud into the wood. Occasionally, something hot and liquid finds its way through a crack, and a man screams. It is slow, terrifying work, inching towards a wall that seems impossibly tall and menacing, pushed along by the shouts of a man-at-arms who stands safely behind you. This is the grim reality of medieval warfare you were never told about. It is not a heroic charge. It is digging a toilet, turning a giant wooden wheel, and pushing a heavy shed while people try to set it on fire. The only thing worse than the work is the profound, soul-crushing boredom that lies between each task. The days have blurred into a monotonous cycle of digging, hauling, and waiting. The military camp, with its pervasive smells and sounds, has become your new normal. The grand castle in the distance has become just another feature of the landscape, as impassive and permanent as a mountain. It occasionally spits an arrow or a rock from its walls, a random punctuation to the boredom, but most of the time it just sits there, silent and defiant. You have come to learn its contours, the way the light catches a particular tower at dawn, the dark shape of the crenellations against the sunset. It is less an enemy fortress and more a stubborn, unpleasant neighbor. Then, one morning, the air feels different. There is a new tension, a hum of nervous energy that runs through the camp, more palpable than the usual low-grade misery. Orders are barked with more urgency. Men-at-arms, usually content to lounge and gamble, are now checking straps and sharpening blades with a focused intensity. You see the knights, for the first time, being attended by their squires, the polished plates of their armor being fitted and buckled. The process is slow and ritualistic. Each piece, the greaves, the cuirass, the gauntlets, is laid on and secured. They are being transformed from men into iron statues. There are no trumpets heralding a grand decision. It is just a subtle shift, a collective intake of breath throughout the entire army. The waiting is over. You are shoved into a loose formation with the other men of your levy. The man-at-arms who directs you has a hard, cold look in his eye. He doesn't shout. He just points. You and you fill the moat. He gestures to a massive pile of earth and rubble that has been accumulating for weeks. This, you now realize, was the purpose of much of your digging. Others are handed ladders, crude constructions of wood and rope, their purpose terrifyingly obvious. You are not given a ladder. You are handed a shield. It is not a fine, kite-shaped shield like the ones the knights carry. It's a simple circle of wood, faced with leather, heavy and unwieldy. With your shield in one hand and your splintery spear in the other, you are told to stand in a line. This is it, the Schiltron. A famous formation that a future Scotland will make its own, but the concept is ancient. A hedgehog of spear points to deter a cavalry charge. You are now part of one of its prickly spines. The theory is sound. The practice feels suicidal. You are packed so tightly together that you can smell the fierce sweat of the man next to you. His name is John, and he's been nervously reciting the names of his children under his breath for the last hour. On your other side, a man you don't know is silently moving his lips in prayer. You wait, and you wait. The sun climbs higher in the sky. Your mouth is dry, a dusty cavern. The rusty pot helmet on your head feels impossibly heavy, its weight pressing down on your skull. Your palms are slick with sweat inside your leather gloves, making the shaft of your spear feel slippery. This is a different kind of waiting. It is not the dull, soul-crushing boredom of the past weeks. This is a sharp, painful and active state of dread. Your entire world has contracted to this small space, to the back of the man in front of you and the sliver of muddy ground you can see at your feet. You find yourself engaging in small, personal rituals. You test the grip on your spear. You adjust the ill-fitting helmet, then adjust it back. You curl and uncurl your toes in your worn-out boots. It's a desperate attempt to exert some small control over a situation in which you have absolutely none. You think of home. Not in a sentimental, wistful way, but in a series of sharp, vivid flashes. The way the wood of your cottage door feels under your hand. The taste of your wife's thin, watery stew. The weight of your sleeping child against your chest. These images are like ghosts, appearing and vanishing in your mind's eye. A life that suddenly seems to belong to someone else entirely. The quiet is the most unnerving part. The usual camp noise has died away. Even the birds seem to have fallen silent. The only sound is the creak of thousands of leather straps, the clink of metal on metal, and the huge, collective, held breath of an army. You look towards the castle. The walls are lined with dark figures, unmoving. They are waiting too. This silent conversation, this shared anticipation of violence, is more terrifying than any war cry. Then, from the center of your own lines, a horn sounds. It is a single, clear, mournful note that hangs in the air for a moment before being answered by 100 others. And with that sound, the spell of silence is broken. A roar goes up from your side, a vast guttural sound of thousands of voices, a mixture of fear, aggression, and something like relief. The men with the ladders begin to move, a slow, stumbling surge towards the moat. The trebuchets, silent for a day, give a great groaning cough and hurl their first stones of the morning. You watch one arc through the air, a dark comma against the grey sky, before it smashes into the parapet of the castle wall, sending a spray of stone chips into the air. And then your own line lurches forward. It's not a charge. It is a slow, shuffling, ponderous walk. A man in front stumbles and a cascade of curses follows as those behind him try not to trip over his sprawling form. The ground is a nightmare of mud and rocks. Your shield feels impossibly heavy now, an anchor pulling your arm down. You hold your spear pointed forward, as you were told, but it's awkward, and you nearly poke the man in front of you several times. All the while, you are marching toward a wall that is now spitting back with a vengeance. Arrows begin to fall. At first, they are distant things, hissing as they pass high overhead. Then they begin to drop closer. There is a sound, a wet, meaty thump, and the man next to John gives a choked cry and pitches forward, a long, black-feathered arrow sticking out of his neck. There is no time to help, no time to do anything but step around him and keep moving. John has stopped reciting the names of his children. He is just making a low, wounded animal sound now. The noise is a physical thing now, a solid wall of sound that presses in on you from all sides. It is a symphony of shrieking metal and splintering wood. The bass drum is the constant rhythmic thud of the battering ram against the main gate. The percussion is the crash of stones from siege engines. The melody is the high, terrifying shriek of arrows in flight, the deep hum of a crossbow bolt, and over it all, the screaming. So much screaming. You are no longer marching. You are engulfed in a chaotic, swirling mess. This isn't the noble clash of steel you see in tapestries. It is a clumsy, brutal, and profoundly noisy business. You brace yourself, clutching your silly shield, wondering if the next sound you hear will be the one that finds you. You are pushed forward by the sheer mass of men behind you, stumbling through the churned mud and over the bodies of the fallen. The air is thick with the smell of blood, sweat, and fear. The grand, orderly plan, if there ever was one, has disintegrated into 1,000 tiny, desperate struggles. Your Schiltron formation, so impressive in theory, has become a ragged, broken line of panicked men. Your world has shrunk to the few feet of space around you. Suddenly, a gate to one side of the main fortress entrance splinters and bursts open. A postern gate, a small door for foot soldiers, and a wave of men comes pouring out. These are not knights in shining armor. They are men much like yourself, dressed in gambesons and iron caps, but their faces are grim and set, and they move with the desperate energy of men defending their homes. They crash into your line not with a clean, heroic clash, but with a messy, stumbling, grunting impact. The man directly in front of you goes down, not from a sword, but from the sheer weight of a charging defender who barrels into him like a sack of grain. Your spear, held forward clumsily, is knocked aside. There is no room for elegant swordsmanship here. There is no fencing, no dueling. This is a brawl. A man swings a heavy, club-like mace, and it connects with the shield of the man beside you with a sickening crack of wood, and you suspect bone. He crumples without a sound. You find yourself face to face with a defender. He has a wild beard and one eye that is milky white. He holds a short, heavy axe. He swings it, not at your head, but at your legs. You clumsy try to block with your shield and the axe head bites deep into the wood. The impact jars your entire arm, a painful shock that runs all the way to your shoulder. For a moment, you are locked together, his snarling face just a foot from yours. You can smell the sour ale on his breath. You react without thinking. You shove forward with your shield, pushing him off balance, and at the same time you jab with your spear. You are not aiming. You are just thrusting into the space he occupies. The spearhead connects. It's a strange feeling, a dull resistance and then a soft, yielding give. It doesn't feel like a heroic, cinematic moment. It feels messy and wrong. You hit his padded gambeson, and the spear point punches through the layers of cloth. It goes in a few inches. He makes a sound, a grunt of surprise and pain, and stumbles back, his hand going to the new dark stain blossoming on his tunic. He looks down at it, then back up at you with a look of pure astonishment, before his legs give out and he sits down hard in the mud. He is not dead, not yet, but he is out of the fight. You don't have time to process what just happened. Another man is already there, wielding a weapon that looks like a farmer's scythe that has been straightened, a billhook. This is the reality of medieval weaponry for the common soldier. While nobles might duel with finely balanced longswords, the vast majority of injuries on a battlefield like this come from crude, heavy, agricultural-looking implements. These are weapons designed to crush, to break, and to tear. Maces that shatter bone through armor, pole axes that can punch through a helmet, and billhooks designed to hook a man and pull him from his horse or off a ladder. This is the grim truth of medieval combat. It It's less about finesse and more about blunt force trauma. You back away, your spear still slick with the blood of the first man. Your heart is a wild drum against your ribs. All around you is chaos. You see a knight on foot, his fine armor dented and smeared with mud, swinging his great sword in wide, heavy arcs. He is a whirlwind of death, but he is slow. For every one of him, there are 20 common soldiers like you flailing at each other with brutish efficiency. A man goes down with a shattered knee from a poorly aimed mace swing. Another screams as the hook of a polearm catches him under the arm and pulls him screaming into the enemy press. Then the horn sounds again. This time, a different note. A retreat. Slowly, raggedly, the attacking force begins to disengage, to pull back from the walls and the gate. It is not a rout, but a grudging, messy withdrawal. The defenders, weary and blooded themselves, do not pursue far. They are content to have held their ground. You stumble backwards with the receding tide of men, your feet slipping in the mud, which is now thick and red in places. You reach the relative safety of your own lines and collapse onto the wet ground, your lungs burning, your entire body trembling with adrenaline. You look down at your spear, then at your hands. They are shaking. You have survived. This time, this simple, astounding fact takes a moment to sink in. But the battle is not truly over. Now begins a different kind of horror. The ground between your lines and the castle walls is a carpet of moaning, twisting bodies. The lottery of survival has been drawn. You have a winning ticket for now, but for hundreds of others their fate is still undecided. This is the part that no song will ever celebrate. The field is not filled with the glorious dead, but with the wretchedly and inconveniently wounded. Men with shattered limbs, men with arrows protruding from their chests, men with horrifying gashes from which their lives are literally pouring out into the mud. Their cries are a constant harrowing chorus. Some scream for their mothers, some beg for water, some just make low, continuous animal sounds of pain. There is no organized medical corps, no teams of medics rushing to the rescue. There are only your comrades, some of whom try to help and some of whom simply stare, their faces blank with shock. You see men trying to pull arrows out of their friends, often doing more harm than good as the barbed heads tear flesh. The sheer randomness of it is what strikes you. A man in full plate armor lies dead from a lucky crossbow bolt through the eye slit of his helmet, while a boy in nothing but a linen tunic, who somehow found himself on the front line, wanders around in a daze, completely unharmed. You remember that little stone that was bothering you in your boot during the march. It seems like a complaint from another lifetime. A quirky fringe tidbit you've now learned is that during some ancient battles, soldiers used to carry small charms, or even recite what they believed were protective incantations. You wonder if any of the men around you had such a charm, and if it made any difference at all. You doubt it. Survival here feels less like a matter of divine protection, and more like a simple, brutal game of chance. You sit in the mud, listening to the dying, and feel nothing but a vast, hollow emptiness. As the initial shock subsides, it is replaced by a grim new reality. The battle may be over for the day, but its consequences are just beginning to unfold. A new kind of order, grim and pragmatic, begins to assert itself. Men are starting to move among the wounded, but not all of them with the intention of offering comfort. You see it happen a few dozen feet away. A man at arms kneels beside a richly dressed body, not a knight, but perhaps a wealthy mercenary captain. With practiced efficiency, he uses a dagger to cut the purse from the man's belt. Then he skillfully unbuckles the dead man's fine leather boots. He ignores the groaning man lying right next to him. This is the first order of business after a fight. Scavenging. It's a ghoulish task, but an entirely necessary one. An army runs on money, and even for the individual soldier, a stolen coin, a silver button, or a good pair of boots can mean the difference between eating and starving. You are roped into this work, not to loot for yourself, but as part of a detail tasked with clearing the field. The primary goal is to retrieve usable weapons and armor, a slightly dented helmet, a salvageable spear, a shield that isn't completely shattered. These are all valuable resources to be repaired and reissued. Remember that questionable armor you were given? This is where it comes from. You are gathering the future hand-me-downs for the next batch of unlucky conscripts. You walk through the field of suffering, trying not to look at the faces, focusing on the objects. You pry a spear from the stiffening fingers of a young man whose eyes are wide and staring at the uncaring sky. You retrieve an iron cap that has rolled into a puddle of bloody water. The work is slow, and every step is a navigation through human misery. This is a far cry from the epics, where the dead are respectfully carried from the field. Here they are unceremoniously stripped of anything valuable. It is a necessary, ghoulish recycling program. And then there is the matter of the wounded. There are no hospitals, no sterile operating rooms. There is the barber surgeon. You see him at work, under a stained canvas awning. He is a man who normally shaves beards and pulls teeth, but on campaign, his skills with a blade are repurposed. His assistants, big burly men, are holding down a soldier on a wooden plank. The soldier has an arrow in his thigh. The barber surgeon probes the wound with a dirty finger, then uses a pair of pliers to grip the shaft. After a brutal pull and a strangled scream from the soldier, the arrow comes free. The wound, however, is now a gaping, bleeding hole. To stop the bleeding, there is only one trusted method: cauterization. The surgeon's assistant pulls a fresh iron poker from a nearby brazier. It glows a sullen, angry red. There is no anesthetic, save for a swig of rough wine and the hope that the patient will pass out quickly. The sizzling sound, the smell of burning flesh, and the high-pitched, unearthly shriek that follows will stay with you for the rest of your life. This is medieval field medicine. It is brutal, based on a limited understanding of the human body, but it is all they have. For injuries too severe, like a shattered limb, there is amputation. You see the surgeon's bone saw lying on his instrument tray, and you quickly look away. The truth is, most men who survive the initial blow will die days later from infection. A clean kill on the battlefield is a strange kind of mercy. While this grim triage is happening for the common soldiers, a completely different scene is playing out elsewhere. You see a small group of knights carefully escorting a captured enemy nobleman back towards their lord's pavilion. The captive is not being mistreated. His wounds are being tended to carefully. His armor, though battered, has not been stripped from him. He is being offered a drink of wine. This is the other great business of warfare: ransom. A common soldier like you is an obstacle. A dead peasant is a tragedy for one family, but a captured knight or lord is a walking purse of gold. He is a valuable asset, to be treated with respect and courtesy until his family pays a hefty sum for his return. This stark difference in treatment is the most profound lesson of the day. A prince's problem is how to negotiate the highest price. A peasant's problem is how to avoid bleeding to death in the mud. The weeks drag on after the failed assault. The siege continues, but the energy has gone out of it. The weather turns colder, The rain is more frequent, chilling you to the bone in your perpetually damp gambeson. Food becomes scarcer. The mood in the camp turns sour and desperate. The quiet dread has returned, mixed with a growing sense of futility. And then, one day, the rumor spreads through the camp like wildfire. A truce has been signed. A deal has been struck between the nobles. Perhaps a marriage was arranged or a piece of land was exchanged. The reasons are a mystery to you. They are the concerns of another world. All you know is that it's over. The great campaign has whimpered to a close. There is no victory parade. There is no triumphant march. There is just packing up. What happens next is something that is rarely recorded in the official chronicles, but is a fundamental reality of medieval warfare. Soldiers begin to desert, not in a panicked rout, but in a quiet, steady drain. The campaign is over. The obligation has been fulfilled, more or less. Many men simply start walking home. They have not been paid, and they likely won't be. Their best chance for survival is to get back to their farms before the winter sets in completely. Historians still argue whether this was considered formal desertion or simply the accepted informal end of a feudal contract. For the men slipping away into the woods, it is not a matter for debate. It is a matter of common sense. You join them. One morning, before the sun is fully up, you and what remains of the men from your village simply gather your meagre belongings, your spear, your worn blanket, the dirty gambeson that you now despise, and you walk away. There is no formal dismissal. No one tries to stop you. The army is dissolving, melting back into the landscape from which it was summoned. The journey home is long and lonely. You are no longer part of a great column, just a small, tired group of men moving through an autumn landscape. Finally, weeks later, you crest the same familiar hill and see the thin wisp of smoke rising from your village. You see your own small cottage, its thatched roof sagging but still standing. Your wife is in the small garden patch, her back to you. When you call her name, she looks up, and her face is a mask of disbelief, then dawning, overwhelming relief. You have returned. You are not a hero. There are no songs being sung for you. You have not come back with riches or tales of glory. You have come back thin, with a new hardness in your eyes and a host of memories you will spend the rest of your life trying to forget. You have left one field of mud and misery only to return to another. You pick up your hoe. The wooden handle feels familiar and comforting in your hands. You are a farmer again. The war was just a brutal, unwelcome interruption. The furrow awaits, and in the quiet of the fields you try to bury the screams, the smells and the faces of the dead under the rich, dark, forgiving earth. What life was actually like for women in medieval times. You open your eyes, but the view doesn't change. The darkness inside the hut is as absolute as the darkness of the pre-dawn world outside. There are no windows, just a single doorway covered by a thick leather hide or a rough blanket that does little to stop the wind. The air is cold, probably hovering just above freezing, and you can see your own breath puffing out in a pale cloud before you. You're lying on a straw-stuffed mattress, a lumpy pallet resting directly on the packed earth floor. You share it with your husband, and on the other side of the small single room, your children are huddled together under a shared woolen blanket for warmth. Privacy is a concept that simply doesn't exist here. It's as foreign as a text message or a lukewarm latte. Your first conscious thought is about the fire, the central hearth, a shallow pit in the middle of the floor, is the heart of your home and your survival. It cannot be allowed to go out completely. You slide carefully from the mattress, the straw rustling loudly in the quiet. Your only garment is a long, coarse linen shift you sleep in, the same one you wear under your woolen tunic during the day. You don't own undergarments. They haven't really been invented yet for your social class, which makes getting dressed in the morning remarkably efficient. You crouch by the hearth, gently blowing on the faint red glow of the embers buried under a blanket of ash. It's a delicate process. Too hard and you'll extinguish them. Too soft and they won't catch. Slowly, patiently, a tiny flame flickers to life. You feed it a handful of dry twigs you gathered yesterday, then larger pieces of wood. Smoke immediately fills the room, stinging your eyes and catching in your throat. It will eventually find its way out through a small, thatch-rimmed hole in the roof, but not before giving the entire space, and everyone in it, a permanent, smoky perfume. With the fire rekindled, the day's rhythm begins. The first task is food. You reach for the large iron pot that sits perpetually by the fire. Inside is the pottage. It's a kind of endless stew, the medieval equivalent of a slow cooker that is never, ever turned off. Yesterday's leftovers are in there, and this morning you'll add a handful of oats, maybe some dried peas and a ladleful of water. You give it a stir with a wooden spoon. If you're lucky, you might have an onion or a bit of tough cabbage from your garden plot to chop and throw in. Meat is a distant memory, a luxury reserved for a feast day, perhaps a bit of salted pork or a tough old chicken. This thin, oaty gruel will be breakfast, lunch and dinner. It's what fuels the relentless labor of your life. As your family begins to stir, woken by the smoke and the crackle of the fire, your next task awaits, fetching the water. You take 2 heavy wooden buckets and step out of the hut. The morning air is a shock, crisp and clean after the fug of indoors. The village is quiet, nestled in a gentle valley. The other cottages, just like yours, are simple structures of wattle and daub, a frame of woven sticks plastered with a mixture of clay, sand and animal dung. It's not exactly prime real estate, but it's home. The walk to the stream is nearly a mile. The path is muddy and slick, and the buckets, even when empty, are cumbersome. As other women from the village emerge from their homes, you join a silent, trudging procession. This twice-daily trip is one of the pillars of your physical existence. When you reach the stream, the water is shockingly cold as you dip the buckets in. The return journey is a grueling exercise in strength and balance. The full buckets weigh a staggering amount, and the wooden handles dig into your hands. Your back and shoulders burn with the effort. No need for a gym membership. Your daily life is a full-body workout that would make a modern personal trainer weep. Back at the cottage, the water is used for everything. For the pottage, for the small amount of washing you'll do, for the animals. Some will be set aside for your husband and sons to take to the fields. The common perception is that medieval men worked the fields and women worked the home, but that's an oversimplification. While you have domain over the cottage and the immediate garden, your labor is absolutely essential to the farm. During planting, and especially during the frantic weeks of the harvest, you will be out in the Lord's fields from sunup to sundown, reaping grain with a sickle until your back screams and your hands are raw. It's a mainstream historical fact that this division of labor was incredibly fluid, especially in peasant communities where every single pair of hands was needed just to survive. Your personal domain is the small plot of land attached to your cottage, known as a curtilage. Here you grow vegetables, leeks, onions, beans and cabbage, and herbs for both cooking and simple medicine. You tend your chickens, carefully gathering their precious eggs. Maybe you have a single pig you are fattening up, a vital source of protein for the winter. The seasons dictate your to-do list. In the winter, when the ground is frozen and the days are short, you sit by the firelight, your hands constantly busy spinning wool into thread with a drop spindle. The whirl becomes an extension of your body, its steady turning a meditative rhythm against the howling wind outside. In the summer, you'll be out bleaching linen in the sun. In autumn, you'll be foraging in the woods for nuts, berries and mushrooms to supplement your family's meager diet, always careful not to stray onto the Lord's protected land. Your life is confined to this small village. You might never travel more than 10 miles from where you were born, but your world is not empty. It's filled with people. You know every single person in this village, their family history, their quarrels, their secrets. The community is your safety net and your prison. If your fire goes out, a neighbor will give you embers. If you fall sick, other women will tend your children and your pot, but they will also watch you. Gossip is the village newsfeed, and your reputation is your most valuable asset. Historians still argue whether the tight-knit community was more of a supportive network or a controlling panopticon, where every action was scrutinized and judged. The only thing that marks the time is the distant clang of the church bell. It tolls to call the men from the fields for a midday meal and signals the end of the workday. On Sunday, it calls everyone to Mass. This is your one day of mandated rest. You put on your best clothes, which is just a slightly less patched, cleaner version of your everyday tunic, and go to church. Inside it's cold and vast, a stone world so different from your smoky hut. You don't understand the Latin the priest speaks, but you know the stories from the faded paintings on the wall and the reverence in the air. After church might be a time for social gathering, and a good ale is at the centre of it. Since water is often unclean, a weak, nutrient-rich ale is the staple drink for everyone, including children. And here lies a quirky little opportunity for you. Brewing, or ale-whiffery, is almost exclusively a woman's task. If your brew is good, you can sell the surplus from your home. You'd place an ale stake, a simple pole with a green branch on top, outside your door to let people know a fresh batch is ready. It's one of the few ways a woman like you can earn her own money, a tiny sliver of economic independence in a world that gives you very little. You're not just a peasant woman, you're the village's original microbrewer, one bad batch away from a bad reputation. As dusk settles, you share the evening meal of yet more pottage with your family. The fire dies down, you check on the animals, bar the door and fall back onto your straw mattress, your body aching from a day of relentless, repetitive work. You close your eyes in the oppressive, smoky dark, knowing that tomorrow the silent dawn will come and you will do it all over again. But now, let's imagine the darkness you wake in isn't silent. It isn't broken by the crow of a distant rooster, but by the rumble of an early cart on cobblestones. The smell isn't of damp earth and smouldering wood, but of baking bread from the shop downstairs, of sawdust from the carpenter next door, and a faint, ever-present pungent aroma of refuse and humanity. You have left the quiet predictability of the village behind. You are a townswoman now. You still sleep on a straw-stuffed mattress, but it's raised off the floor on a simple wooden frame. And you're not on the ground floor. You live in a jettied house, a timber-framed building where each successive story juts out over the one below, creating a narrow canyon of a street that the sun rarely touches. Your small sleeping chamber is directly above your husband's workshop. You might be a baker's wife, a chandler's, a tanner's. Your life is intrinsically woven into the fabric of his trade, a constant presence of sight, sound and smell. Your morning shift is finer linen, and over it you'll pull on a woolen kirtle, but the wool is of a better quality, perhaps dyed a rich colour like green, or even a deep madder red, depending on your family's prosperity. Sumptuary laws, rules dictated by the town council, determine what fabrics and colours you are allowed to wear. A visual guide to the delicate social ladder. Wear a silk ribbon when you're only meant for simple wool, and you could face a fine or public shame. Instead of walking a mile to a stream, you fetch your water from the public fountain in the town square. A journey of 100 paces through a bustling, obstacle-ridden street. Here, the competition for clean water is fierce. The fountain is the town's meeting point, its nerve centre. While you wait your turn, you hear everything. Which merchant received a new shipment of wine? Whose daughter is being betrothed? Who's being brought before the magistrate for selling watered-down ale? The street is your sewer, your garbage disposal, and occasionally your news source. It's the original, extremely fragrant, social media feed. Your workday isn't tied to the seasons in the same way as your country counterparts. It is a daily, relentless churn of production and commerce. If you are the baker's wife, you aren't just baking for your family. You are a key part of a commercial enterprise. Before the sun is fully risen, you are downstairs in the heat of the bakery. While your husband handles the heavy work of the ovens, you are kneading dough, shaping loaves, tending to the sweet honey cakes that bring in extra pennies. You serve the customers who line up at the wooden shutter that opens onto the street, making change, wrapping loaves in cloth. You keep the accounts, a simple but vital tally of flour bought and bread sold. Your literacy, a functional and valuable skill. This brings us to one of the most significant differences in your life. Your work has a clear monetary value. In the countryside, your labour contributed to communal survival. Here, it contributes to cash profit. A mainstream historical fact of urban life is that women were deeply integrated into the guild system, the professional organisations that controlled all trade within a city. While you likely can't be a full guild member yourself, your status is linked to your husband's. And crucially, if he were to die, you could, in many trades, apply to the guild to continue the business as a widow. You could become the official master baker, hiring journeymen and taking on apprentices. It is a precarious but powerful form of security unknown to a peasant woman, and you might have an apprentice of your own. While boys were apprenticed to learn skilled trades, it was common for girls too, to be sent to another household to learn the womanly arts, not just spinning and sewing, but also the specific skills of the household trade. This quirky tidbit is often overlooked. Young women entered into formal contracts for 7 years of training. Think of it as a 7-year-long unpaid internship, but with less coffee and more potential for contracting the plague. For a young girl from the country, securing an apprenticeship in a town household was a path to a better, more prosperous life. The world of urban work is vast compared to the village. If you aren't married into a trade, as a single woman, a femme sole as the law calls you, you still have options. You could be a seamstress or an embroiderer, working with fine threads to adorn the clothes of wealthier merchants. You might be a silk weaver, one of the highly respected and skilled trades often dominated by women. You could return to that familiar role of the alewife, but on a grander scale, running a bustling tavern full of travellers and locals, a demanding and sometimes dangerous but profitable venture. Remember our countrywoman selling her home brew from a cottage door? You might have a 2-story tavern with hired help. You are a businesswoman. But with these opportunities comes a different kind of confinement. Your reputation is still paramount, but now it's tied to your credit and your craft. If you sell a poorly made garment or are accused of using cheap ingredients, your business could fail. The community is still watching, but now they are your customers and your competitors. The guild enforces quality, and their judgment is final. Your husband could be fined if your public conduct is seen as disruptive or unseemly. Historians still debate just how much true independence this work afforded women, or if they were always considered secondary to the male-dominated guild structures, their authority provisional and forever dependent on their relationship to a man. The church bell still chimes the hours, but here it has to compete with the constant din of hammers on anvils, the shouts of merchants in the marketplace, the squeal of ungreased cart wheels, and the cries of children playing in the muck. The market itself is an overwhelming sensory experience. The stalls are crammed together, a riot of colours and smells. Here is the fishmonger, his wares laid out on a wet stone slab, their silvery scales glittering. Next to him is the spicer with exotic, almost magical-smelling sacks of peppercorns, cloves and ginger brought from unimaginable distances. You move through the crowd, your purse held tight, bartering for goods, gathering information, seeing and being seen. In the evening, you don't fall into the exhausted, bone-deep quiet of the countryside. The town hums on. The taverns are full and the sound of laughter and singing spills into the street. Your home, though small, feels secure. You have a solid door with a real lock. The ambient warmth from the bakery downstairs seeps up through the floorboards, a small but constant comfort. Your pottage is thicker here, more likely to contain a bit of bacon or a piece of salted fish. Life is louder, smellier and more complex. It offers more risk, but also the tantalizing possibility of something more. Not just survival, but prosperity. You are a cog in the engine of commerce, a citizen of a thriving, dirty, vibrant little world. A world you help build and maintain. One loaf of bread, one stitch, one transaction at a time. Now, whether you wake in the smoky quiet of the countryside or the noisy clamour of the town, one institution will shape your destiny more than any other: marriage. For you, this is not a union born of romance, whispered secrets and fluttering hearts. It is, first and foremost, a transaction. A social and economic contract negotiated between two families, with you as the central and often least consulted party. Your marriage prospects are a frequent topic of conversation from the moment you're old enough to spin thread. In your peasant cottage, your father worries about having enough land or livestock to offer as a dowry. He might need to offer his best pig and a few acres of the family plot to secure a good match for you with the son of a neighbour who has a bit more land than he does. It's a practical consideration. Combining plots means more to farm, more food, a stronger household. The union is meant to strengthen the community and ensure both families' survival. If you are a townswoman, the stakes are different, but the principle is the same. Your marriage is an investment. A master craftsman might seek you out for his son, not for your pretty eyes, but for your father's excellent business connections or the sizable dowry he can offer in cold, hard cash. This dowry isn't a gift. It is a vital injection of capital into the new household. It might be used to buy more raw materials, to expand the workshop, or to pay the hefty fee for the son to finally become a guildmaster himself. Your marriage could be the linchpin of an entire family's upward mobility. This is a business merger. and you are the key asset. You probably don't get a choice in who you marry. Your parents will decide. They will weigh the benefits, consider the family's reputation, and make a match that seems most advantageous. You might meet your intended husband for the first time on your betrothal day. Historians widely agree that affection and love were seen as things that might hopefully grow out of a well-managed marriage, not as a prerequisite for it. Love was a fortunate byproduct, not the foundation. The betrothal itself is a serious, legally binding event. It's an exchange of vows in the future tense. I will take you as my wife. I will take you as my husband, often performed in front of witnesses, sometimes on the porch of the church. This public declaration is almost as significant as the wedding itself. Once betrothed, you are in a legal grey area, not quite married but no longer considered single. When the wedding day comes, it is a day of great feasting and public celebration, regardless of your social status. Your neighbours or fellow guild members will contribute food and drink. There's music, dancing, and a raucous procession from your family's home to the church. After the religious ceremony, you are officially a wife. Your legal identity now merges with your husband's under a concept known as coverture. You are no longer a femme sole, but a femme covert, a covered woman. Your husband is now legally responsible for you, and almost everything you own, or will own, now belongs to him. With marriage comes the primary expectation placed upon every wife, noble or peasant: childbirth. It is your sacred duty and your most dangerous task. The joy of a positive pregnancy test is, for you, tempered by a very real and rational fear. Giving birth is the single most life-threatening event a medieval woman will face. Complications that are routine for us are death sentences for you. A baby in the wrong position, a hemorrhage after birth, an infection in the days that follow. All can be, and often are, fatal. The entire process is a strictly female domain. No men are allowed in the birthing chamber. Your mother, your sisters, female neighbours, and if you can afford one, a midwife, will attend you. The room is kept warm, the windows are covered to keep out draughts and malevolent spirits. Your attendants murmur prayers and encourage you with time-honoured advice. They may offer you herbal concoctions to ease the pain or strengthen contractions, the effectiveness of which is highly debatable. This brings us to a slightly fringe medical tidbit from the era. Some birthing girdles, long scrolls of parchment inscribed with prayers and biblical passages, were rented out by churches or monasteries to labouring women, wrapped around their bellies in the hope of a safe delivery. The demand was high, making them quite the little revenue stream for the church. It's like a spiritual TN's machine, but with significantly more anxiety attached. If all goes well and a healthy baby is born, there is relief and celebration. But the danger isn't over. Postpartum infections known as childbed fever are common killers. Simple hygiene is not understood. The hands that deliver your baby may have just tended the chickens. But should you survive, your status in the household and the community is elevated. You have done your duty. The pressure now shifts to having a son, to carry on the family name and inherit the land or the workshop. Historians still argue whether medieval people felt the same kind of deep personal grief we do at the staggering rates of infant and child mortality, or if the sheer commonality of loss necessitated a more stoic, resigned, emotional state. It's a difficult and somber question. Now, as wife and mother, you take on your full role, mistress of the household. This is not a passive title. You are a manager, an administrator, a COO of the domestic sphere. Remember our peasant woman from the first section, tending her garden and making pottage. Now expand that 1,000-fold. As the wife of a prosperous merchant or a minor landowner, you are responsible for a large and complex operation. You oversee the food supply for a household that might include not just your immediate family, but servants, apprentices, and farm hands. This means managing the pantry, salting meat for the winter, smoking fish, brewing ale and mead in vast quantities, making cheese and butter, and preserving fruits and vegetables. You are in charge of the household budget, carefully allocating funds for everything from expensive imported spices to cheap tallow for candles. You also manage the staff. You hire the servants, direct their daily tasks, and settle their disputes. You are the head of HR for a team that has no days off and lives on site. Their well-being and productivity fall to you. You are the family's first line of medical defense. You cultivate a garden filled with medicinal herbs. You know which ones to use for a fever, which to make into a poultice for a wound, and which to brew into a tea for an upset stomach. You are the keeper of generations of practical, woman-to-woman medical knowledge. Some might call you a healer, others might whisper the word witch, if your remedies seem a little too effective or unusual. Your power lies in this domestic knowledge, a sphere where men rarely tread. Your life may be legally and socially defined by your husband, but within the walls of your home and its associated lands, your authority is very real, your work utterly indispensable. From calculated betrothal to perilous birth to complex management, your life is a constant quiet exercise of power in the spaces you are allowed to command. Let us now ascend the social ladder past the muddy fields and crowded town streets to a world built of cold, imposing stone. You are no longer worried about the price of flour or the health of your single pig. You are a noblewoman, and your home is a castle. You wake up not in a single room with your family, but in a private chamber, a solar, adjoining the great hall. Yet, privacy is still a relative concept. Your ladies-in-waiting, young women from other noble families serving in your household, sleep on pallets on the floor around your bed. They are your companions, your servants, and your chaperones, always present. The first thing you notice is the cold. Castles are notoriously drafty, formidable fortresses not designed for comfort. The stone walls sweat with damp, and even with a roaring fire in your personal hearth, a deep, penetrating chill is a constant companion. Thick, heavy tapestries hang on the walls, not just for decoration, but as a practical and very expensive form of insulation. You don't pull on a simple linen shift. Yours is of the finest, softest make, imported from Flanders. Your kirtle isn't coarse wool, but perhaps velvet or silk, dyed a deep, luxurious blue or a scandalous scarlet, depending on what the latest sumptuary laws allow for your rank. The sumptuary laws we mentioned in town life are even more rigid here. Your clothing is a walking billboard for your family's status and wealth. Forget brand names. The type of fur trimming your sleeve, ermine, sable, or common squirrel, says everything. Your morning routine is not about fetching water or lighting the cooking fire. It's a ritual of adornment. Your ladies help you dress, lacing up your gown, arranging your hair into intricate braids and coiling them under a veil or a fashionable headdress. Beauty is not just a personal preference. It is a political tool. A pale complexion was highly desirable, signaling that you did not have to labor outside in the sun. This led to a quirky and rather dangerous beauty trend. Women often used face powders made with lead to achieve a ghostly pallor. You essentially apply a thin layer of poison to your face every morning, a slow, toxic path to ideal beauty. And you thought microdosing was a new thing. After dressing, you attend private mass in the castle's chapel with your family. Your faith is a structured daily observance, led by your family's personal chaplain. It is an integral part of your refined and ordered world. Your work is starkly different from that of the peasant or townswoman, but it is no less demanding. A significant portion of your day is dedicated to management. Remember the townswoman managing her household staff. You are doing that on an epic scale. As the lady of the manor, you are the chief administrator of a massive, complex enterprise. You are in charge of supplies for a household that could number in the hundreds, from knights and squires to a legion of servants. You oversee the castle's food production and stores, manage the finances and ensure there is enough firewood, wine and clean linen to maintain the castle's function and prestige. When your husband, the lord, is away, which is often, given the prevalence of war, political court duties or hunting excursions, the entire responsibility of the castle and its surrounding lands falls to you. This is a mainstream historical fact that shatters the image of the passive, decorative noblewoman. You could be in charge of the estate's defense. You would direct the garrison, ensure the walls are maintained, and manage supplies in case of a siege. You would hold court, settling disputes between tenants and villagers, dispensing justice in your lord's name. Your letters would be full of reports on crop yields, delinquent rents, and local skirmishes. You are not just a lady. You are a deputy CEO, a logistics expert, and, when necessary, a military commander. A key difference in your life is your education. While most women were illiterate, you can likely read and write, not just in your native tongue, but perhaps in French or even a little Latin. Your education is designed to make you a capable household manager and a worthy companion for a powerful man. You are taught music, embroidery, and dancing, the graceful arts of the court. But you are also taught mathematics for account keeping and governance for estate management. Your skill with a needle is not just for darning socks. You and your ladies might spend years working on a single enormous tapestry, depicting a great battle or a biblical story, a piece of art that would serve as both a historical record and a display of incredible wealth. Your marriage is the most important political and economic event of your life. While the peasant's marriage secured land and the townswoman's secured a business, your marriage can secure peace between kingdoms, forge a powerful alliance, or bring vast new territories under your family's control. You have likely been betrothed since you were a small child, a pawn in a high-stakes dynastic game. You might be sent to your fiancé's court at a young age to be raised in their customs, a lonely political exile far from your own family. The pressure to produce a male heir is immense, far exceeding that of other classes. An heir secures the lineage and the transfer of lands and titles. A daughter, while valuable for her own marriage prospects, cannot inherit the primary title in most cases. Historians still argue about the emotional dynamics of these arranged noble marriages. Was it a cold, loveless partnership, or did genuine affection and respect often develop between two people bound by such profound duty? Certainly, the letters that survive between some noble spouses show deep care and partnership, a reliance on each other in a dangerous and unstable world. Your social life revolves around the court. Feasting in the great hall, entertaining visiting nobles, and participating in elaborate tournaments are all part of the job. You must navigate a complex web of etiquette, favor, and rivalry. A misplaced word or a perceived slight could have serious political repercussions for your family. And even here, in this elevated world, you are not entirely safe. Political fortunes shift like sand. Your husband could fall out of favor with the king, be accused of treason, and have his lands and titles stripped away. Your entire world, for all its stone walls and velvet gowns, could be forfeit overnight. You live a life of immense privilege and profound responsibility, of luxurious confinement and surprising power, your fate forever tied to the fickle tides of politics, war, and the frailties of the human body. So far, we have explored the paths laid out for you. Wife, mother, manager, peasant, townswoman, noble. But what if none of these fit? What if the path of marriage and childbirth, the central pillar of medieval womanhood, was one you chose or were forced to refuse? There were other doors, other lives existing in the margins and cloisters of this structured world. Let us imagine one such door, leading not to a cottage or a castle, but into the quiet, sacred space of a convent. You have chosen a life as a nun, a bride of Christ. This was one of the few respectable alternatives to marriage for a woman of the time. The reasons for entering a convent were varied. Perhaps you felt a true spiritual calling, a deep, unwavering devotion to God. Or perhaps you were the third daughter of a nobleman who couldn't afford another dowry, and the convent was a socially acceptable and far cheaper place to send you. For some, it was a refuge from a world that offered few intellectual or autonomous roles for women. Your day is not structured by the sun or the market, but by the divine office, a cycle of 8 prayer services that begin before dawn with matins and end after dusk with compline. The ringing of the chapel bell is the rhythm of your existence. You chant the psalms in Latin, your voice joining those of your sisters in a timeless melodic wave that fills the cold stone church. This shared ritual is the bedrock of your communal life. Here, in the cloister, you find something incredibly rare, an opportunity for a formal education. Many convents were centers of learning. You would learn to read and write, not just for basic accounts like the townswoman, but to study the scriptures, the lives of saints, and even classical texts. The convent library might be one of the best in the region. You could become a skilled manuscript illuminator, spending your days bent over vellum, painstakingly copying texts and embellishing them with vibrant colors and delicate gold leaf. Historians credit these anonymous women with preserving vast amounts of knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. Life in the convent was not one of idle contemplation. It was a self-sufficient community. The nuns ran farms, managed estates, and often ran hospitals or almshouses for the poor and sick. You might become the abbey's herbalist, tending an extensive medicinal garden, building on the knowledge of your secular sisters, but with the added benefit of access to written medical texts. Your role as a healer was respected and vital. The abbess, the elected head of the convent, was a figure of immense power. She was a major landowner, a spiritual leader, and an administrator, interacting with bishops, lords, and even kings on an equal footing. In a world dominated by men, the abbess was an exception, a woman who wielded significant institutional authority. However, life wasn't without its rigors. The food was simple, the comforts few. You were bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. You owned nothing personally, and your life was subject to the strict rules of your order and the will of the abbess. It was a life of submission, but a submission to God and a community of women, rather than to a husband. A truly quirky detail of convent life is the existence of anchoresses, women who chose an even more extreme form of devotion. An anchor hold, a small cell, was built against the wall of a church, and the woman was literally sealed inside in a ceremony that resembled a funeral rite. A small window allowed her to see the altar, and another small opening let her receive food and speak to visitors seeking spiritual counsel. She was a living saint, a permanent fixture of prayer buried in the heart of the community. But what if you lived even further outside the established norms? What if you operated without the sanction of the church or the protection of a guild? Here we find the mystics, the healers, and those labelled heretics. You might be a woman like Marjorie Kempe, a brewer's wife from a town, who after a difficult childbirth experienced intense religious visions. She left her husband and family to travel across Europe on pilgrimages, weeping and shouting her devotion in public. She was illiterate, but dictated her life story, creating the first known autobiography in the English language. She was a curiosity, often seen as a nuisance but also revered by some as a true mystic. Her life shows that even an ordinary woman could carve out an extraordinary, independent spiritual path. Or you might simply be a wise woman in a village. You hold the collective memory of herbal remedies, midwifery skills, and folk magic. You are the one people come to when the priest's prayers and the noble's physician have failed. You know how to ease a colicky baby, find lost things with a bit of ritual, or create a love charm for a desperate girl. Remember the peasant woman's fear of a splinter? You would be the one to create the poultice to draw out the infection. Your power is unofficial, rooted in tradition and results. But it's a dangerous power. If a child you attend dies, or if a lord's cattle sicken after you've had a dispute with him, suspicion can easily turn against you. The line between healer and witch is perilously thin, drawn not by you but by the fear and superstition of your neighbours. Historians still argue how much the great witch hunts of a later period were rooted in this long-standing suspicion of women who wielded informal, nature-based power. And so, as we look back, we see that your legacy as a medieval woman is written everywhere. Though often in invisible ink, it's in the survival of a family line, secured by a strategic marriage. It's in the booming commerce of a city, built on the back of countless family workshops where wives were equal partners in labour, if not in name. It's in the carefully tended medicinal herbs in the cloister garden, a living library of healing knowledge. It is written in the threads of a tapestry, in the scrawled accounts of a great estate, and in the dictated words of a weeping mystic. Your life was not a romantic fairy tale of chivalry, nor was it a uniform tale of oppression. It was a complex negotiation between immense constraints and surprising opportunities for agency. Your world was smaller, harder, and more fragile than ours, but it was one you navigated with resilience, skill, and a quiet strength that echoed down the centuries. From the smoky darkness of a peasant's hut to the gilded cage of a castle, from the noisy workshop to the silent cloister, you endured. And in your endurance you shaped the world you inherited, leaving legacies in thread and in ink, in bloodlines and in businesses, often hidden but never truly gone. The shocking truth about knights in the Middle Ages. It is cold in the great hall. Settle in and let your mind drift backwards, past centuries of noise and light, into a time of stone and shadow. Imagine the feeling of rough spun wool against your skin, the distant smell of wood smoke and damp earth that seems to permeate everything. You are 7 years old and you have just been sent away from home. This isn't a punishment. On the contrary, it's a great honour. Your father, a man of some means, has arranged for you to serve in the household of a greater lord, a powerful baron whose castle looms over the surrounding countryside like a jagged grey tooth. This is the first step on a long and uncertain path. You are to become a knight. Forget the storybooks, the gleaming heroes on white steeds. The reality of your journey begins here, as a page, in the heart of a bustling and frankly rather fragrant medieval castle. Your life is not your own. You wake before the sun, the chill of the stone floor seeping through the thin straw mattress you share with two other boys. Your first duty is not to learn swordplay, but to learn service. You carry messages darting through crowded corridors with the specific, urgent focus of a child entrusted with an adult's task. You serve the Lord and his lady at their meals, standing silently behind their heavy oak chairs. Your job is to fill their goblets with wine, to carve their meat, a skill you must learn with a small, sharp dagger, and to ensure their every need is met before they even think to ask. You learn to be invisible, yet always present. The castle is a world of its own. It's a hive of activity, of clanging blacksmiths, gossiping laundrywomen, and the ever-present grumbling of men-at-arms. You are at the very bottom of this complex social ladder. You fetch and carry. You run errands. You learn to read and write, perhaps, if the Lord's chaplain has the time and inclination. You learn numbers, not for poetry, but for tallying stores of grain and casks of ale. And you learn manners, the intricate dance of medieval etiquette, how to bow, when to speak, who to look in the eye, and whose gaze to avoid. This is the medieval equivalent of an unpaid internship, a decade-long apprenticeship in lordship, but with significantly more manure and less comfortable footwear. Your entertainment is a rehearsal for your future. You wrestle with the other pages, strengthening your small frame. You practice with wooden swords and small shields, the hollow thwack of wood on wood echoing in the courtyard. The bigger boys, the squires, sometimes use you for target practice, not with arrows, but with harsh words and the occasional cuff to the head. You learn resilience, or at least how to look like you're not about to cry. You learn to hunt, starting with birds, mastering the hawk and the falcon. The feel of the leather glove on your hand, the weight of the bird of prey, its dark, unblinking eyes staring into yours. It's a lesson in control, in wielding a living weapon. After 7 or 8 years of this, sometime around the age of 14 or 15, if you've proven yourself capable, you are elevated. You become a squire. This is a promotion of sorts. The work is harder, the responsibilities greater, and you are now personally attached to a knight. You are his shadow, his valet, his groom, his bodyguard. Your day still begins in darkness, but now your first duty is to your knight's war horse, a beast worth more than a peasant's entire village. You feed it, groom it, and shovel its waste from the stables. The smell of horse and hay becomes your constant companion. Then you see to the knight's armor. This is not the gleaming stainless steel you see in museums. It is heavy, cumbersome plate and mail, prone to rust. A large part of your day is spent on maintenance. You sit on a low stool with a barrel of sand and a vinegar-soaked rag, scrubbing relentlessly at every plate, every link of chain, removing the insidious orange-red bloom of oxidation. You polish it with a cloth until it has a dull, functional gleam, the luster of a well-used tool, not a parade ornament. You learn the name of every single piece, the greaves for the shins, the gauntlets for the hands, the sabatons for the feet, the helmet, the cuirass. You learn to strap your knight into this 50-pound metal skin, a process that can take up to an hour, and requires an intimate knowledge of buckles, leather ties, and your knight's particular grunts of discomfort. You are his personal mechanic. Historians still argue whether the path to knighthood was primarily a martial training program or a system of social networking. Was it about creating an elite warrior, or was it about ensuring the sons of the nobility were embedded in a web of loyalties and obligations? You, as a squire, feel it is very much both. The martial training is relentless now. You graduate from wooden swords to blunted steel ones. The practice sessions are grueling, leaving your arms and back screaming with exhaustion. You learn to fight on horseback, to control a powerful, charging destrier with your knees while your hands hold a shield and a heavy lance. You learn the physics of the charge, the precise moment to brace for impact, the way to angle the lance to punch through an opponent's defense without it being ripped from your grasp. It's in these moments you also see the less than chivalrous side of your knight. You see him after a battle, not as a shining hero, but as a tired, irritable man caked in sweat and grime. You are the one who has to pry off his dented helmet, to clean his wounds, to mend his equipment. You hear the casual cruelty in his voice as he discusses ransom for a captured enemy, treating a fellow nobleman not as a respected adversary, but as a sack of gold. You see how chivalry is often a performance, a set of rules that applies splendidly to tournaments and courtly life, but becomes flexible in the heat of a real campaign. One of the lesser known and slightly odd duties you might have is guarding your knight while he takes a bath. This wasn't a frequent luxury. Baths were often a communal affair in large wooden tubs, but a lord might have a private one. While he soaks, you would stand guard outside the chamber, ensuring his privacy and safety. It was a sign of immense trust, leaving you to protect him in his most vulnerable state. It's a strange intimacy, a bond forged not just in battle, but in the mundane, unguarded moments of life. Finally, after years as a squire, perhaps in your early 20s, the moment arrives. You might be knighted on the eve of a great battle, a practical measure to bolster the number of commanders on the field. Or it could be part of a great ceremony, a feast day. You are ritually bathed, a symbolic washing away of your past self. You spend a night in a vigil, praying in the castle chapel, alone with your armor and weapons laid out on the altar. As you kneel in the silent, cold stone space, lit only by a few flickering candles, you are meant to contemplate the solemn vows you are about to take, to protect the weak, to uphold justice, to serve your Lord and God. Though in the back of your mind you're also likely thinking about the crushing debt your family incurred to pay for your horse, your custom-fitted armor, and all the finery this day requires. The anointing with the flat of a sword on your shoulder is less a moment of pure divine transformation and more a slightly stressful piece of public theatre. Try not to flinch. Don't trip over your new spurs. Everyone is watching. And then it is done. You rise. Sir, a knight. The end of a long, arduous, and deeply unglamorous path, but it is only the beginning of a new one. The weight is the first thing you truly understand, not as a squire hefting a single greave or a helmet, but the cumulative, oppressive reality of it all, settling onto your shoulders, your hips, your very bones. It is a 50, 60, perhaps even 70-pound version of you, a steel exoskeleton that announces your presence with every clank and squeak of leather. You paid for it with a small fortune, the equivalent of a luxury car, and now you must live inside it. Welcome to your personal tin can. Your squire, a boy not unlike you were just a few years ago, does the work. You stand passively, arms slightly out, like a patient being dressed for a strange metallic surgery. First comes the arming doublet, or gambeson. This is a crucial, deeply underrated piece of technology. It is a thick, padded jacket, often stuffed with layers of linen or scrap cloth, and it is your primary defense against the chafing, pinching and bruising that the armor would otherwise inflict. It's also surprisingly complex, covered in lacing points called arming points, basically medieval grommets, where the individual pieces of plate will be tied on. Into a special pocket, you might slip a lucky charm, a saint's knucklebone perhaps, or a smooth stone from your family's estate. This padded cocoon is the unsung hero of your survival. Then the steel begins its slow crawl up your body. The sabatons over your leather boots, articulating plates that allow your feet to flex. The greaves for your shins, the polins for your knees, the cuisses for your thighs. Each piece is tied securely to the arming doublet. Then the breastplate and backplate, a heavy carapace buckled together at the sides. The folds that protect your waist, the tassets that hang over your upper thighs, pauldrons on your shoulders, rear braces and vambraces for your arms, and finally, the gauntlets. You flex your fingers, feeling the strange, delayed sensation of movement through hinged plates of steel. You are now almost fully encased. The last piece is the helmet. Your squire holds it ready. You take a final deep breath of open air, and then you nod. It slides down over your head, and the world is instantly and irrevocably changed. Light and sound drain away, replaced by a new, intensely personal environment. Your vision is reduced to a narrow slit, the ocularium. You have almost no peripheral sight. To see anything to your left or right, you must turn your entire head. A stiff and deliberate motion. Navigating a crowded room or a narrow doorway becomes a game of chance. You find yourself mentally mapping the space around you based on memory and the muffled sounds that reach your ears. And the sound. Oh, the sound. The world outside is a muted, distant thing. The clash of steel, the shouts of men, the whinnying of horses, it all sounds like it's happening underwater. The dominant noises are your own. The creak of leather, the soft ink of plates sliding over one another, and above all the sound of your own breathing, loud and intimate in the enclosed space. A private, clanking echo chamber for your own nervous thoughts. You can smell the oil on the steel, the faint aroma of the wax used to seal it, the worn leather of the straps, and the building scent of your own sweat. It is profoundly isolating. You are not, as legend would have it, a helpless turtle on its back if you fall. A full suit of plate armor from this period was a masterwork of ergonomic engineering. It was designed for movement. You can walk, you can run, in a sort of lumbering short-distance jog. You can mount your horse from the ground, and yes, you can get up if you are knocked over. It takes effort, a specific rolling technique using your knees and elbows to gain momentum, much like a modern firefighter getting up in full turnout gear. But you can do it. The myth of knights being craned onto their horses was largely a product of later excessively heavy tournament jousting armor, not functional battlefield plate. For you, the main issue isn't mobility, it's endurance. Wearing this suit for hours on end is a grueling ordeal. In the summer sun, it becomes a personal oven, trapping heat against your body. The padded gambeson soaks with sweat, becoming heavy and foul. Dehydration is a constant, serious threat. In the winter, the steel leaches warmth from your body, becoming achingly cold, and a poorly fitted joint can pinch your skin with the ferocity of a blacksmith's tongs. Then there are the more delicate, biological realities. What if you need to relieve yourself? There is no elegant answer. There are no cleverly hidden flaps or zippered codpieces on most battlefield armor. The entire lower portion of the armor, the tassets, folds, and leg harnesses would have to be unbuckled and removed. This is a problem requiring significant pre-planning and a very understanding squire. In the heat of a long battle, the simple, undignified truth is you often just had to go. This is a side of knighthood they do not include in the tapestries. Maintaining this suit is a battle in itself. Rust is your eternal, insidious enemy. After any exposure to dampness, be it rain, river crossings, or simply a humid evening, your armor must be meticulously cared for. Your squire will work for hours with barrels of sand, water, and vinegar to scour away any hint of oxidation. The plates are then polished with a fine abrasive, like powdered brick or emery, before being coated with a thin layer of oil or wax to protect them. Neglecting your armor isn't just lazy, it's a public declaration. It shows a lack of discipline and, more importantly, a lack of wealth. A gleaming suit is a status symbol. A rusty one suggests you can't afford the time or the staff to keep it pristine. Historians still argue whether the elaborate fluting, engraving, and fanciful shapes that armor began to adopt in the late Middle Ages were driven more by the demands of battlefield protection or by fashion and the social theatre of the tournament. Was that elaborate, sweeping ridge on your breastplate, the taper as it's called, designed primarily to deflect a lance tip? Or was it the 15th century equivalent of a pinstripe suit, designed to make you look taller and more formidable in the lists? As you run a gauntleted hand over the polished curves of your own breastplate, you sense the answer is both. It is a tool of war and a piece of high fashion, an instrument of death and a declaration of your place in the world. You have become one with your armor. Its strengths are your strengths. Its weaknesses, the heat, the exhaustion, the narrow field of vision, are also yours. It is the shell that defines you, protects you, and separates you from the rest of humanity. It is your fortress and your prison. You stand in your polished steel, a walking effigy of honor. In the poems and songs, your purpose is as clear and bright as your blade. You are a shield for the weak, a sword for the just. You're to be courteous to ladies, merciful to your defeated foes, and steadfast in your faith. This is the code of chivalry, a beautiful and intoxicating ideal that hangs in the air like fine incense during a high mass. But now you trudge through the muddy track of a cart road, somewhere deep in enemy territory, and the scent in the air is not incense, it's mud and fear and the smell of a dozen unwashed men. The ideals feel very far away. Chivalry was less a strict set of binding laws and more a fluid, evolving cultural ethos, a gentleman's agreement among violent men who owned the sharpest things. It was a way to distinguish yourself, the noble warrior, from the common foot soldier. It provided a framework for how you should behave, particularly towards others of your own class. You are expected to show mercy to a defeated knight because one day you might be that defeated knight. It's a professional courtesy, an investment in your own future survival. The ransom you can extract from a captured lord is far more valuable than his corpse. War, for your class, is a business venture, and chivalry provides the brutal but generally accepted rules of commerce. But these rules are remarkably selective. The code that demands you treat a captured French duke with all the hospitality his station deserves does not extend to the peasant militia that was fighting alongside him. They are not part of the club, They cannot pay a ransom. They are, in the cold calculus of medieval warfare, an obstacle. You might ride them down without a second thought. Chivalry is a class-based system, an exclusive set of behavioral guidelines for the 1%ers of the medieval world. Remember that whole protecting the weak part of your vows. It's a lovely sentiment, but its practical application is often conditional. The weak and powerless peasantry on your own lord's land are to be protected because they are a resource, a part of his wealth. The weak and powerless on enemy land are a different matter entirely. The tournament field is where chivalry is put on its most spectacular display. It's a lavish, glorious affair. Brightly coloured pavilions dot the landscape. Banners snap in the wind. The ladies of the court, dressed in their finest silks, watch from stands built especially for the occasion. Here, you are not just a soldier, you are an athlete, a performer. You joust, two armoured comets hurtling towards each other on horseback. The goal not necessarily to kill, but to shatter your lance perfectly against your opponent's shield, or to unhorse them in a spectacular crash of man, beast, and steel. It is a sport of immense skill and danger. Injuries are common, and fatalities are not unheard of. Between jousts there is the melee, a grand chaotic team battle where two sides of knights clash in a mock combat that can rage for hours across acres of open ground. It is here you hope to win honour, renown, and if you're lucky, some serious prize money and the ransom of a captured opponent or two. Yet even in this controlled environment, the lines blur. A courteous jousting pass might involve aiming your lance not at the shield, but at your opponent's head, a decidedly ungentlemanly and often fatal move. Historians still argue whether the tournament was primarily a form of military training, a way to keep warriors sharp between wars, or if it was pure social spectacle, an aristocratic sport that became increasingly detached from the realities of the battlefield. It seems to have been a bit of both. You learn valuable skills to be sure, but you also learn how to play to a crowd, how to present yourself as the perfect chivalric hero. You might dedicate your performance to a lady, wearing her token, a sleeve or a ribbon tied to your helmet. This is courtly love, a highly formalized and theatrical form of admiration that was almost never about genuine romance. It was more like celebrity worship, a public performance of devotion that elevated both your status and the ladies. It was all part of the show. Then there is the grim reality of a siege. Your lord has laid claim to a castle, and its defenders have refused to surrender. There is no glorious charge here, no chivalrous one-on-one combat. There is only a slow, grinding and deeply unpleasant process of starvation and attrition. You are part of the army camped outside the walls, and the rules of chivalry begin to fray. Your primary job might be to lead raids on the surrounding countryside, the chevauchée. This isn't noble warfare, it's a campaign of economic terrorism. You burn villages, destroy crops, drive off livestock and instill fear in the local populace. The goal is to demoralize the enemy, to break their will to fight by destroying their ability to support themselves. There is no glory in setting fire to a peasant's hovel or slaughtering his sheep, but it is brutally effective, and it is part of your duty. Inside the besieged castle, things are equally grim. If the defenders hold out for too long, any pretense of chivalrous mercy evaporates. When the castle finally falls, it is often subject to a sack. The carefully constructed rules of engagement are abandoned. While you might still spare a captured nobleman for ransom, the common soldiers and the civilians are shown no such quarter. It is a chaotic, brutal affair. This is the dark underside of your profession, the part that is not celebrated in song, but is an undeniable and frequent reality of your life. One peculiar but documented tactic in this grim context was psychological warfare of the most visceral kind. During a long siege, attackers might use a trebuchet, a massive catapult, not just to hurl stones but to launch diseased animal carcasses or severed heads of captured soldiers over the walls. It was a way to spread disease and terror, a shocking breach of anything resembling a code, and a far cry from the ideals you supposedly represent. So you exist in this state of perpetual contradiction. One day you are composing a poem for a lady of the court, displaying the height of refined sensibility. The next, you are ordering your men to strip the lead from a church roof to make ammunition for your cannons. You are capable of immense bravery and great piety, spending a night in prayer before a battle. You are also capable of ruthless pragmatism that borders on pure savagery. Chivalry, you come to realize, is your formal attire. You wear it on state occasions, at tournaments, and in the presence of your peers. But when the hard, dirty work of war needs doing, you often find yourself rolling up your sleeves and setting it aside. It is your best self, an ideal to aspire to, but the world you inhabit often demands something far less noble. It is a beautiful lie you tell yourselves, to make the violent business of your lives a little more palatable. The trumpets and the thunder of the charge are fleeting moments, punctuation marks in a life that is otherwise defined by long, slow, and often crushingly dull paragraphs. You imagine your life is one of constant adventure, a highlight reel of clashing swords and daring rescues. The truth, you discover, is that for every minute spent in glorious, heart-pounding combat, you spend hours, days, even weeks, in a state of profound and echoing boredom. Your daily routine, when not on an active campaign, is a monotonous loop dictated by bells and the position of the sun. You rise early, attend morning mass in the castle's chilly chapel, a non-negotiable part of the day. Piety is both a personal and a public requirement of your station. After a small, quick breakfast, the day's work begins. This is not the adventurous work you might expect. Much of your time is consumed by administrative duty. As a knight, you are not just a fighter. You are a manager, a landlord, and a bureaucrat in armor. You might spend the morning hunched over a heavy oak table with your lord steward, reviewing accounts. You are learning the business of the manor. How many bushels of wheat did the North Fields produce? Why is the yield down this season? A miller is suspected of cheating the peasants by taking too large a portion of their flour. You are tasked with riding out to his mill and investigating. This is less like a heroic quest and more like an audit. You have to understand contracts, land deeds, and the intricate web of feudal obligations that hold this entire society together. You learn that power is not just held by the sword, but by the ledger book. It's a dry, dusty reality, a far cry from wrestling a dragon, but arguably more important for the day-to-day survival of the estate. The afternoons are often dedicated to practice, a desperate attempt to stave off both rust and boredom. You practice your weapon skills in the tilt yard, sparring with other knights and squires. The endless repetition of drills, the 7 basic cuts, the various parries, becomes a form of meditation. You ride, practicing maneuvers with your war horse, keeping both the animal and yourself in fighting condition. These are the physical equivalents of your administrative duties, the constant grinding maintenance required to keep the machinery of war ready. And then there is the food, the great feasts of story and song, with their roasted swans and mountains of delicacies, are for special occasions. Your daily diet is a blander affair, dictated by seasonal availability and the rudimentary science of food preservation. Bread is the staple of every meal, not light, airy loaves, but dense, heavy bread made from wheat or rye. You eat a lot of it. The main course is often a pottage, a thick, soupy stew that simmers over the fire all day long. Whatever is available goes into the pot. Vegetables from the castle garden like onions, leeks and cabbage, and perhaps some dried peas or beans. Meat is a sign of wealth, and you eat it more often than a commoner, but it's not a daily guarantee. When you do have it, it might be salted pork, smoked herring, or tough, stringy, boiled beef. Fresh game from the hunt, venison, rabbit, boar, is a welcome relief from the monotony. One of the great historical facts of medieval cuisine is its love for spices, at least among the wealthy who could afford them. But this wasn't necessarily to show off wealth, though it did, but often to disguise the fact that the meat was, well, past its prime. Lacking refrigeration, meat that wasn't freshly killed or perfectly preserved had a tendency to go off. A heavy-handed application of pepper, cloves, mace or cinnamon could help mask any undesirable flavors. You eat your meal from a trencher, a thick slice of stale bread that serves as your plate. At the end of the meal, this sauce-soaked trencher might be given as alms to the poor waiting at the castle gates, or simply tossed to the dogs who scavenge under the table. So much for fine dining. The water is often suspect, so you drink ale, cider or wine with most meals. Even the weakest, small beer was safer than a cup from the local river. Entertainment is a simple affair. In the evenings, the great hall offers some respite from the tedium. A travelling minstrel might appear, plucking at a lute and singing long, rambling ballads about epic heroes whose lives seem much more interesting than your own. You play games. Chess is a popular and respected pastime, a game of strategy befitting a military mind. You also play dice and various card games, often gambling away small sums of money. Historians still argue whether these games were seen primarily as a harmless diversion or as a morally dangerous gateway to sloth and avarice. The church certainly condemned gambling, but that rarely stopped a group of bored knights with time on their hands. You sit by the fire, talking with your fellow knights, sharing stories, maintaining the bonds of your fraternity. Even on a campaign, the rhythm of war is mostly waiting. You march for days on end, the routine a wearying cycle of breaking camp, slogging through mud or dust and making camp again. You stand guard duty for hours, staring into the oppressive darkness, every rustle of leaves a potential ambush. When you lay siege to a castle, like you did earlier, the waiting can stretch into months. The enemy is behind their walls. You're in your camp. Days bleed into one another in a haze of guard duty, foraging for food, maintaining equipment, and simply trying not to fall ill. Disease is a far greater threat than enemy swords. A bout of dysentery can fell more soldiers than a pitched battle. A surprisingly common battlefield ailment was saints. Anthony's fire, a type of gangrenous infection caused by eating rye bread contaminated with the ergot fungus. It was a miserable and often fatal condition that had nothing to do with enemy action. So this is your life, a strange mix of the mundane and the martial. You are a warrior, an accountant, a policeman, and a bored country squire all rolled into one. You find purpose not just in the brief, shining moments of glory, but in the steadfast endurance of the long, quiet hours in between. You learn to handle a lance, but you also learn to handle logistics. And you learn, most profoundly, that the life of a knight is not an escape from the tedious business of living, but just a different, heavily armoured and occasionally violent version of it. You stand at the edge of the field, a familiar position. You can feel the reassuring weight of the steel on your shoulders, the worn leather of your horse's reins in your gauntleted hands. The enemy is across the way, but something is different now. The air doesn't just hold the familiar tension of an impending cavalry charge. It hums with something new. You see it in the serried ranks of the common foot soldiers, peasants and burghers from the towns. They are not the usual disorganized levy, easily swept aside. They are standing in disciplined blocks, and they are holding impossibly long pikes, their steel tips forming a glittering forest that seems to bristle with contempt for your noble charge. This is the beginning of the end. You, the pinnacle of medieval military technology, are slowly, inexorably, becoming obsolete. The world is changing, and it no longer revolves entirely around you. Your traditional role, the thing you have trained for your entire life, is the mounted charge. The couched lance technique, where the lance is tucked under your arm and guided by the immense momentum of you and your warhorse, created a weapon of unparalleled shock value. For centuries, a well-executed charge of heavy cavalry was the decisive maneuver on the European battlefield, a thunderous hammer blow that could shatter enemy formations and win the day. But your opponents have had a few centuries to think about this, and they have been working on an answer. That answer is the pike. A simple weapon, really. Just a long wooden pole, 16, 18, maybe even 20 feet long, with a sharp metal point. Individually, a pikeman is vulnerable, but massed together in a deep, tight formation, a pike square or tercio becomes an almost unstoppable defensive unit. It is a giant, angry hedgehog. When you charge towards it, you are not met with fleeing men, but with a solid wall of sharpened steel set firmly against the ground. Your horse, for all its training and bravery, will not impale itself on that wall. The charge falters. It breaks. You are left milling about, tantalizingly out of reach, a perfect target. While you are trying to solve the riddle of the pikes, another sound begins to punctuate the battlefield. A sharp twang, followed by a sound like a swarm of angry hornets. This is the English longbow, or the Welsh longbow to be more precise. In the hands of a skilled yeoman archer, this weapon is terrifyingly effective. An archer can loose 10, even 12 arrows a minute, and while a single arrow might not punch directly through the front of your heavy breastplate, a popular mainstream fact is that well-made plate was largely proof against medieval arrows. It doesn't have to. An arrow can find the weaker points at your joints, in the visor of your helmet, or, more devastatingly, it can strike your horse. An unhorsed knight is not a helpless turtle, remember, but you're a much less effective and far more vulnerable fighter on your own 2 feet, lumbering through the mud. Then comes an even more profound change. A dirty, ugly noise, a loud, echoing boom that rolls across the field, followed by a thick cloud of foul-smelling white smoke. Gunpowder. The earliest hand cannons and arquebuses are crude, inaccurate, and slow to reload. They are more likely to frighten a horse than to kill a knight. But the technology improves with relentless speed. The slow matchlock gives way to the more reliable wheel lock, then the flintlock. The lead ball they fire does not care about your chivalry, your noble blood, or the exquisite craftsmanship of your Milanese armour. With enough velocity, it can punch straight through your steel shell. Suddenly, a peasant with minimal training and a cheap firearm can kill the most expensively equipped and highly trained warrior on the battlefield from 100 yards away. This is the great equalizer, and it completely rewrites the rules of war. Historians still argue whether it was the longbow, the pike, or gunpowder that was most responsible for the decline of the knight. The truth is likely that it was a combination of all three, a combined arms revolution from which your class would never recover. The battlefield is no longer a stage for aristocratic duels. It is becoming a much more impersonal and lethal workplace. At the same time, the economics of warfare are shifting beneath your feet. For centuries, feudalism was the engine of military recruitment. A king would call upon his great lords, who in turn would call upon their household knights like you to fulfill their military obligations. But this system is slow, cumbersome, and often unreliable. A new model is emerging, the mercenary company. A king or a prince discovers that it is far more efficient to simply hire professional soldiers for cash. These mercenaries, like the Swiss pikemen or German Landsknechte, fight for pay, not for fealty. They are disciplined, experienced, and they fight with the new weapons and tactics. A king with a deep treasury can now raise a powerful army without relying on his fractious, independent-minded nobles. Your obligatory service becomes less critical. You feel this shift in your own life. The costs of being a knight, the armor, the war horses, the squires, the pageantry, continue to rise, while your military usefulness continues to fall. The role isn't disappearing overnight, but it is changing. You become more of an officer, a commander leading units of these new types of soldiers, rather than the primary shock weapon yourself. Your armor becomes more ornate, more a symbol of your aristocratic status for parades and tournaments than a practical tool for the battlefield. That elaborate fluted helmet that makes you look so impressive at the joust is a death trap of ricochets and spalling on a battlefield dominated by firearms. One of the more quirky signs of this transition is the rise of the knight entrepreneur. Some knights, seeing the writing on the wall, lean into the new economy. They form their own mercenary companies, becoming military contractors who sell their services and the services of the men they command to the highest bidder. It's the ultimate pragmatic response to becoming obsolete. If you can't be the star player anymore, become the coach and owner of the team. Sir John Hawkwood, an English knight of the 14th century, became one of the most famous and successful mercenary captains in Italy, a testament to this changing reality. And so you stand at the cusp of a new era. You look at the field, at the pikemen and the archers and the hazy smoke of the handguns, and you feel a sense of profound melancholy. The simple, brutal clarity of your world is dissolving. The songs and poems will still be sung. Your image will be romanticized for centuries to come, becoming a symbol of a lost age of honor and adventure. But here now, in the fading light of the Middle Ages, you understand the shocking truth. You are a relic, a magnificent, powerful, beautifully crafted relic, but a relic nonetheless. The future of war smells like sulfur, and it belongs to the common man with a gun in his hands. Your time is over, and as the day ends, you slowly, quietly, turn your horse and ride away from the battlefield into the pages of history. Strange medical cures of medieval times. Let yourself sink back into the pillows and let the noise of the modern world fade away. We are drifting back past centuries of scientific certainty to a time when the world and your own body felt much more mysterious. Imagine you are not in your comfortable bed but resting on a straw-stuffed mattress, the rough wool of a blanket pulled up to your chin. There's a faint smell of wood smoke and damp straw in the air. For the past few days you've felt off. A persistent cough rattles in your chest. You have a low fever that leaves your skin feeling both hot and clammy, and your usual cheerful disposition has been replaced by a weary lethargy. You have done what any sensible person would do. You've said a few extra prayers and you've tried to rest, but it's not getting better. And so your family has sent for the physician. This is no small expense. His visit alone costs more than a skilled labourer might earn in a week. When he arrives, he doesn't burst in with a team of assistants. He enters quietly, a gaunt figure in a long dark robe. He brings with him an air of solemn authority and the faint, not unpleasant scent of dried herbs and old books. He doesn't ask you for your symptoms in the way a modern doctor would. He is not here to listen to a list of complaints. He is here to observe, to be a scholar of your personal climate. He is a detective, and the crime is an imbalance inside of you. He sits on a stool beside your bed, his gaze calm and analytical. He places a cool, dry hand on your forehead to gauge your temperature. He might ask you to stick out your tongue, but his most intense focus is reserved for a small flask of your urine, which was dutifully collected and held up to the light of the window. He swirls it gently, observing the colour, the clarity, the sediment. To the modern eye, it's a bizarre and deeply unhygienic practice. To him, it is the primary diagnostic tool, a liquid window into the very essence of your being. This is because in this world, all of your health, your personality, your very existence is governed by a beautifully simple and elegant system, the theory of the four humours. This is the bedrock of all medicine, an idea passed down from the great thinkers of ancient Greece, like Hippocrates and Galen, and accepted as fundamental truth. The theory posits that your body is made up of four essential fluids, or humours. They are blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A healthy person has these four liquids in perfect harmonious balance. Sickness is, quite simply, the result of having too much or too little of one of them. Your entire constitution is just a complex, squishy recipe. And right now, your personal recipe is off. Each humour is linked to an element, a season, an age of man, and a set of qualities. First, there is blood. Associated with the element of air and the season of spring, its qualities are hot and moist. A person with a dominance of blood is sanguine, cheerful, optimistic, and ruddy-cheeked. The life of the party, if parties involved less dancing and more avoiding the plague. Then comes phlegm. This isn't just the stuff you cough up. It's a fundamental essence. Associated with water and the chilly depths of winter, its qualities are cold and moist. A person dominated by phlegm is phlegmatic, calm, unemotional, even-tempered, and perhaps a little sluggish. The reliable friend who will calmly help you barricade the door during a peasant revolt. Third is yellow bile, or choler. This is the fluid of fire and the hot, long days of summer. Its qualities are hot and dry. A choleric person is fiery, ambitious, and quick to anger. You know this type. The lord of the manor who's always shouting about the state of the treasury or the impertinence of a neighbouring baron. Finally, we have the most mysterious of them all, black bile, or melancholy. Linked to the earth and the dying light of autumn, its qualities are cold and dry. A person in whom black bile dominates is melancholic, thoughtful, introspective, sensitive, and prone to sadness. These are the poets, the brooding philosophers, and anyone who thinks too long about the general dampness and futility of it all. The physician nods slowly, his diagnosis forming. He sees your fever, the flush in your cheeks. He notes the color of the liquid in the flask. You are too hot and too moist. You have, he declares, an excess of blood. You are running a surplus of sanguine humor. The cure, therefore, is not to attack a germ or a virus. Such concepts are fantasies. The cure is to restore your internal balance, to drain the excess, to help you on your path to recovery. He also prescribes a specific diet. This is a crucial and often overlooked part of humoral medicine. Everything you could possibly eat or drink was also classified according to this same system. Foods were considered hot, cold, moist, or dry in their intrinsic nature. Your current feverish state is a hot and moist condition. Therefore, you must consume foods that are cold and dry to counteract the imbalance. He prescribes a diet of barley water and perhaps some lean fish, which are considered cooling. He strictly forbids you from eating red meat, cheese, or drinking wine, as these are all heating foods that would only add more fuel to your sanguine fire. Historians still argue whether the complex dietary charts that physicians used were practical guides for daily living, or if they were largely theoretical ideals that only the very wealthy and meticulous could ever hope to follow. For a peasant subsisting on bread and pottage, the idea of choosing between hot or cold foods would have been an absurd luxury. This way of thinking even extended to the air you breathe. As a peculiar but logical extension of the theory, a physician might advise you to move to a room with a different aspect, perhaps one facing north to get cooler, drier air to balance your hot, moist condition. It's a remarkably holistic system. Your environment, your food, your emotional state, and your physical health were all woven together. One fascinating tidbit is how they believed emotions could literally generate humors. A fit of rage could produce an excess of hot, dry yellow bile, leading to indigestion or a rash. A prolonged period of grief could create a dangerous surplus of cold, dry black bile. Your feelings could make you physically sick by upsetting your internal chemical balance. And so you lie there, contemplating his words. It doesn't seem strange or nonsensical. In fact, it feels profoundly logical. It connects your personal suffering to the grand, elemental forces of the universe, to the changing of the seasons, to the very nature of fire and water. You are not a random victim of disease. You are a finely tuned instrument that has simply fallen out of harmony. And now, the physician has told you how to tune it. The first step will be a change in diet and environment. But the most direct and effective method, he explains with a calm and reassuring tone, is to simply remove the excess humor directly from your body. Your journey back to health is about to get a whole lot messier. The physician does not perform the procedure himself. That would be manual labor, beneath a man of his scholarly station. His job is the diagnosis, the intellectual work of reading the signs and prescribing the cure. For the physical application, he summons a different kind of expert, the barber surgeon. Soon, a new man arrives at your bedside. He's more craftsman than academic, his hands calloused and capable. You might have seen him before, trimming beards or lancing a boil for a neighbor. The red and white pole outside his shop is a well-known symbol, representing the blood and bandages of his trade. He is the man you see if you need a neat trim, a tooth pulled, or to be artistically drained of your vital fluids. He unwraps a leather roll, revealing a set of gleaming and frankly intimidating metal tools. He greets you with a business-like calm that is somehow both reassuring and terrifying. There is no question of a second opinion. The physician has declared an excess of blood, and the barber surgeon is here to correct the balance sheet. This isn't malpractice. For thousands of years up until the late 19th century, bloodletting was a standard mainstream medical procedure performed for a vast array of ailments. It was considered the most reliable way to treat a fever. You are instructed to extend your arm. He probes the crook of your elbow with a practiced thumb, searching for a prominent vein. He ties a strip of linen tightly around your upper arm, and the vein swells, becoming a taut blue line beneath your skin. He selects his tool. It's not a clumsy knife, but a specialized instrument called a lancet, designed to make a quick, clean cut. He places the point against your skin. You are told to look away, to breathe deeply. There is a sudden, sharp sting, much like a modern injection, but somehow more personal. Then a strange warmth as your own life force, your excess humor, begins to spill out. A brass bowl is held underneath to catch the flow. The barber surgeon watches the stream intently, a grim sort of sommelier judging the quality and quantity of the vintage. The physician might stand by, observing the process with detached academic interest. They aren't guessing. They are aiming for a specific volume, an amount calculated to restore balance without accidentally sending you to meet your ancestors ahead of schedule. As the bowl fills, the room begins to feel a bit swimmy. The edges of your vision soften, and the physician's voice seems to come from a great distance. You feel lightheaded, weakened. This, you are told, is a good sign. The fever is breaking. The excess heat is leaving your body along with the excess blood. Once the prescribed amount has been taken, he skillfully bandages your arm. And just like that, it is over. But what if your ailment was more localized? Perhaps a throbbing pain behind your eyes or a swollen, aching joint. A general bloodletting from the arm might be too crude. For a more targeted approach, the physician would prescribe leeches. The barber surgeon produces another container, this one a damp earthenware jar. Inside are a dozen or so dark, writhing shapes. Leeches. These creatures were a staple of the medieval medical toolkit. In fact, the very word for a doctor in Old English was lace, from which we get leech. They were considered nature's tiny, perfect phlebotomists. He takes one of the slimy invertebrates and applies it to your temple. Its powerful rear sucker attaches to your skin, and you feel a faint, tickling sensation as its head end searches for purchase. The leech's saliva contains a complex cocktail of chemicals, including a natural anesthetic so you feel no sharp pain, and a powerful anticoagulant, hirudin, to keep the blood flowing freely. You just lie there, a quiet and patient host, as the creature does its work. It swells slowly, its dark body growing plump and taut as it fills with your hot, superfluous blood. Once it has drunk its fill, it simply detaches and falls away. This was seen as a gentler, more natural method of rebalancing. Historians still argue whether the perceived benefits of treatments like bloodletting were due to any real physiological effect, like reducing blood pressure, or if they functioned primarily as an extremely powerful placebo. When a patient endures such a dramatic and tangible procedure, the psychological belief in the cure itself can be a potent medicine. But blood wasn't the only humour that could fall out of balance. What if your problem was an excess of cold, sluggish phlegm or bitter yellow bile? The physician wouldn't call for the lancet then. Instead, he would prescribe a purge. This was a full-body cleansing designed to expel the offending humour through any available exit. You would be given a potion, a brew designed to trigger a violent reaction. The recipe might include powerful herbs like scammony or hellebore, substances known for their dramatic effects on the digestive system. The brew he offers you looks and smells like something dredged from a local pond, and you suspect its main effect is to persuade your insides to stage a full-scale and very sudden rebellion. Soon after drinking it, you are overcome with a wave of nausea, and your body violently expels the contents of your stomach. This is an emetic, designed to get rid of excess phlegm, which was thought to reside in the head and chest. If the problem was an excess of yellow or black bile thought to be centered in the gut, you would be given a powerful laxative instead. The effect would be equally dramatic, just directed downwards. A peculiar but surprisingly common treatment for constipation, believed to be caused by an excess of cold, dry black bile, was to take a perfectly smooth, well-oiled suppository made from soap. Yes, a bar of soap. It was considered a reliable, if rather undignified way to moisten and move a sluggish bowel. Now, lying back on your straw mattress, you feel utterly drained. Your arm throbs faintly, you feel weak from the blood loss, and your stomach is in a state of delicate truce. You feel empty, scoured out. According to the physician, this is excellent news. The imbalanced, sickly version of you has been bled and purged away. Your internal recipe has been reset. Now, with a careful diet of cooling foods and plenty of rest, your natural healthy humours can replenish themselves in the proper proportions. You feel terrible, but you are filled with a strange kind of hope. You have survived the cure. Surely you must be getting better. Now that your humours have been violently rebalanced through bleeding and purging, the second stage of your recovery begins. The physician, having addressed the immediate crisis, now turns his attention to supporting your system with carefully chosen remedies. He will consult his books, perhaps a weathered copy of a herbal by Dioscorides or an Arabic medical encyclopedia. The cure he prescribes will not come in a neat, blister-packed pill. It will come from the local apothecary, a shop that smells like a magical collision between a spice merchant, a garden shed, and a dusty corner of a natural history museum. The apothecary's shelves are a wonderland of the strange and the exotic. You will find hundreds of glass and ceramic jars, each meticulously labelled in Latin, filled with dried herbs, flowers, roots, and seeds. Many of these are the foundations of traditional herbalism, plants whose medicinal properties are still recognized today. There is willow bark, a source of salicin, the precursor to aspirin used for pain and fever. You will find foxglove, which contains digitalis, a powerful cardiac stimulant, though the medieval apothecary didn't know why it worked, only that it could help with dropsy, the swelling we now associate with congestive heart failure. There are chamomile flowers to calm the stomach, and valerian root to aid with sleep. This is the mainstream, sensible part of his inventory. But nestled among the sensible herbs are substances that would make a modern pharmacist's hair stand on end. You see, the medieval world did not draw a firm line between a drug and a food. A prescription was as much a recipe as a chemical formula. Your prescribed remedy might be a complex electuary, a sort of medicinal paste made by mixing powdered ingredients with honey or sugar. And the ingredients in your particular paste are choice. For your lingering cough, the physician might prescribe a spoonful of a syrup containing horehound, licorice root, and a generous pinch of powdered ginger. So far, so good. Sounds like a decent throat lozenge. But to truly boost its efficacy, he may add a substance known as mumia, or mummy powder. This was exactly what it sounds like, actual ground-up, embalmed ancient Egyptian mummies imported from the Near East. It was an exceptionally popular and highly regarded medicine, thought to possess powerful healing properties derived from the bitumen and resins used in the mummification process. It was prescribed for everything from headaches to stomach ulcers. Of course, the demand far outstripped the supply of genuine pharaohs, leading to a gruesome cottage industry of faking mummies using the corpses of recently executed criminals or unclaimed bodies, which were then dried, treated with bitumen, and sold to unscrupulous merchants. That's a fun thought to have as you swallow your medicine. Let's say you have an ailment of the skin, a nasty rash or a sore that won't heal. The apothecary might prepare a salve. The base is often lanolin, a fat derived from sheep's wool, or beeswax. The active ingredients could be comfrey or calendula flowers, both known for their skin-soothing properties. But for a truly potent poultice, the physician might specify the inclusion of something more exotic. For certain conditions, physicians, following the principle of like cures like, prescribed concoctions based on animal parts. A powder made from the dried, ground-up lung of a fox was thought to be an excellent treatment for respiratory ailments like asthma. Following the same logic, a powder made from a wolf's liver might be prescribed for a liver complaint. The pharmacy also doubles as a jewelry store of a sort. Gemstones were not just for adornment, they were believed to have powerful intrinsic magical and medicinal properties. You wouldn't necessarily wear them. More often they would be ground into a fine powder and added to a potion. Emeralds were thought to be excellent for calming the eyes and curing epilepsy. Sapphires were believed to act as an antidote to poison and to dispel anger. Pearls, when ground up and mixed with wine or water, were a favorite remedy among the wealthy for strengthening the heart and soothing melancholy. It was the medieval equivalent of an eye-wateringly expensive nutritional supplement, its value stemming as much from its rarity and beauty as any perceived medical benefit. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of these exotic and often disgusting-sounding ingredients was driven by genuine belief in their efficacy, or if it was more a form of conspicuous consumption and psychological theatre. Did a nobleman who could afford powdered sapphire in his medicine believe it worked because it was a sapphire, or did he believe it worked because it cost a fortune, and therefore must be better than a simple herbal brew? The placebo effect of taking something so rare and valuable would have been immense. It's hard to feel like your cold is just a common cold when you're treating it with ground-up unicorn horn, which was usually just the tusk of a narwhal sold at a fantastic markup. One of the more quirky and stomach-turning fringe remedies was the use of animal excrement, which featured surprisingly often in medical texts. The dung of a wild boar, dried and powdered, might be mixed with wine and drunk to treat dysentery. The droppings from a white dog, known as album graecum, when dried and powdered, were made into a paste to soothe a sore throat. The logic, however flawed, was that since the substance had passed through a body without harming it, it must have some powerful inherent properties. We must remember this was long before germ theory. The idea that these substances were teeming with bacteria was utterly unknown. To them, it was just another organic ingredient, no different from an herb or a root. It wasn't a practical joke. It was serious medicine. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen from ancient Egypt? It seems some ideas have a disturbingly long shelf life. So you are sent home from the apothecary with a collection of powders, pastes, and syrups. Your instructions are to take them at specific times, perhaps aligned with the phases of the moon, for maximum effect. You look at the dark, thick electrory in the small ceramic pot. It smells earthy and sweet from the honey, with a strange, dusty undertone you now recognize as powdered Egyptian tourist attraction. You take a small spoonful. It tastes interesting. But as you swallow, you take comfort in the knowledge that you are consuming the finest, most potent ingredients that wisdom and wealth can provide. You are not just recovering, you are absorbing the very power of the earth, of rare gems and, disturbingly, of long-dead kings. The tinctures and powders from the apothecary have done what they can, but your problem, it turns out, is not something that can be dissolved by a ground-up gemstone or banished by an expensive dose of mummy dust. Your affliction is mechanical. Perhaps it's a bladder stone, an agonizing crystalline passenger that makes every moment a misery. Or maybe it's a cataract, a milky film slowly drawing a curtain over the world. It could even be a wound from a simple accident, a fall from a horse, a misplaced axe stroke that has refused to heal cleanly. The physician, having exhausted his knowledge of potions and potages, now recommends the final, most terrifying option. The time for balancing humours has passed. It is time for cutting. Once again, the barber surgeon is summoned. Remember him? The practical, capable man who performed your bloodletting. His role in this society is uniquely versatile. He is the master of any sharp implement used on the human body. He arrives not with jars and flasks, but with a roll of heavy cloth that he lays out on a nearby table. Inside is a formidable array of steel, probes, forceps, saws with wicked-looking teeth, and knives of various shapes and sizes. They glint in the dim light of the room. His expression is one of grave focus. This is the most serious work he does. It is loud, it is messy, and your chances of walking away from it are, let's call it, uncertain. The first and most pressing question in your mind is how you will possibly endure this. The answer is, for the most part, you won't be asleep. While they are not without options, reliable, safe anesthesia is a fantasy from a far-off future. The most common preoperative care consists of a large quantity of strong wine or distilled spirits, enough to dull your senses and your wits, but not enough to render you unconscious. They do have knowledge of anesthetic sponges, a sort of medieval rag soaked in chloroform. These would be soaked in a potent cocktail of opium, mandrake root, henbane, and other narcotic herbs. When held over the patient's nose and mouth, they could, in theory, induce a state of stupor or even unconsciousness. However, the dosage was a terrifying guessing game. Too little, and you wake up mid-procedure. Too much, and your breathing simply stops forever. It was a risk many surgeons and patients were unwilling to take. The mainstream historical fact is that for most of these procedures, you are awake, and speed is the surgeon's greatest asset. His reputation rests not on the fineness of his stitches, but on how quickly he can get in, do the job, and get out. His Yelp reviews are mostly just screams, but the good ones all mention he was very, very fast. Let's say you are afflicted with a bladder stone. This procedure, the lithotomy, is one of the oldest surgeries known. You are placed in a specific, undignified position on a sturdy table, with your legs pulled up and held fast by two strong assistants. Their job is simple, to hold you still, no matter what. The barber surgeon probes, finds the location of the stone and makes a swift, deep incision. There is no delicate exploration. This is a direct assault. The sound in the room is primal. The sharp rasp of the knife, the surgeon's grunts of exertion, and your own muffled cries into a leather strap you've been given to bite down on. He uses a specialized pair of forceps to reach in, grasp the stone and pull it free. The whole ordeal, if he is good, is over in a few minutes that stretch into an eternity. He shows you the stone, a bloody, jagged trophy of your shared ordeal. The next challenge is closing the wound and stopping the bleeding. Here again, the methods are brutal but based on a certain logic. The surgeon may use sutures, needles made of bronze or sharpened bone, with thread made of silk or animal sinew. But for a large bleeding wound, the preferred method is cautery. An iron poker is heated in a nearby brazier until it glows a menacing cherry red. The surgeon, using a thick pad of cloth to protect his own hand, takes the searing hot metal and applies it directly to your wound. The hiss and the sickening sweet smell of your own burning flesh fills the air. It is an act of incredible violence, but it is not sadistic. It is a desperate, effective way to seal blood vessels and, they believed, to purify the wound of its evil heirs. It's not the kind of barbecue anyone is ever eager to be invited to. And what about the risk of infection? They have no germ theory, no understanding of bacteria or microbes. But they are not fools. They can observe results. They know that some wounds fester while others heal cleanly. This is where we find a strange, accidental success. One of the most common ways to clean a wound was to wash it with wine. They believed the wine had drying properties that counteracted the moist humours associated with rot. They didn't know that the alcohol in the wine was a natural antiseptic, killing bacteria that could lead to gangrene. This quirky tidbit shows how, through observation and a flawed theoretical framework, they could stumble upon a genuinely life-saving practice. Historians still argue whether the most respected surgeons of the age were essentially just well-practiced butchers with a high tolerance for screaming, or if they possessed a subtle, sophisticated and unwritten understanding of anatomy and recovery. Did they, through trial and error, learn which tissues to avoid, how deep to cut, and how to anticipate the body's reaction? Their survival rates for complex procedures like trepanation, drilling a hole in the skull, or amputation were astonishingly low by modern standards. Yet some patients did survive. It suggests a level of practical skill that their crude theoretical knowledge cannot fully explain. So you lie there, bandaged and possibly cauterized, the phantom pains of the blade echoing through your body. The stone is gone. You have survived the craft of the barber surgeon, but a new battle is just beginning. Every twinge, every bead of sweat raises the same terrifying question. Will a fever set in? Will the wound begin to fester and weep? You have escaped the knife. Now you have to pray you can escape the invisible dangers that follow in its wake. Your post-operative recovery plan, you come to realize, consists almost entirely of not dying, and you are encouraged to pursue it with great enthusiasm. You have survived. You survived the physician's solemn diagnosis, the barber surgeon's gleaming lancet and glowing cautery iron, and the apothecary's stomach-turning potions. The stone that tormented you now sits in a small cloth bag on your bedside table, a strange and lumpy souvenir. But your ordeal is not over. In fact, in the quiet hours of the night, a new and more insidious battle has begun. A familiar heat is spreading through your limbs. The fever is back, the surgical wound on your body, for all the wine-washing and prayers muttered during the cutting, is angry, red, and swollen. The medicine of man has reached its limits. Now, you must turn to a higher power. In this world, sickness is never just a simple matter of biology. It is deeply intertwined with your spiritual state. A persistent illness might be a sign of divine disfavor, a punishment for some unconfessed sin. It could be a test of your faith, sent by God to measure your devotion. Or, in the darkest of possibilities, it could be the work of a demon, or the result of a curse laid upon you by an enemy. Therefore, A cure cannot be merely physical. It must also be spiritual. Your family, seeing the grim turn you have taken, sends not for the physician again, but for the priest. The priest arrives, carrying with him the scent of beeswax candles and old incense. His presence brings a different kind of calm to the room, one of an authority that transcends the physical world. He doesn't look at the flask of urine or the surgical wound. He looks at your soul. He hears your confession, listens to the catalogue of your life's petty and not so petty failings. He anoints you with holy oil and leads you in prayer, asking for forgiveness and deliverance. This is not just a comfort. In the medieval mindset, it is a direct and powerful form of medical intervention. And the prayers are specific. The heavens are a vast and complex bureaucracy, and you need to ensure your appeal gets to the right desk. You pray to the patron saints who specialize in your particular type of suffering. This is a well-established and important mainstream fact of medieval life. Do you have an affliction of the eyes, like the cataract that was just removed? You direct your prayers to Saint Lucy, who is often depicted holding her own eyes on a platter. A throat ailment requires a plea to Saint Blaise. Sufferers of the plague, the great terror of this age, have their own powerful advocate in Saint Roch, who famously contracted the disease and recovered. It's a system of divine specialists, and your family prays fervently, hoping to get the attention of the celestial expert in post-operative infections. Think of it as a divine customer service line, where you frantically try to get routed to the correct department. For a truly powerful intervention, prayer might not be enough. You need something tangible. You need a relic. This is the age of relics. A splinter of the true cross, a bone from one of the apostles, a thread from the Virgin Mary's cloak. These are not just historical artifacts. They are conduits of divine power, physical objects charged with the grace of God. Churches and cathedrals across Europe compete to house the most impressive collections, drawing pilgrims from hundreds of miles away. If you are too sick to make the journey, sometimes a relic can be brought to you. The priest might touch your wound with a piece of bone from a local saint, a direct application of holiness to your affliction. A bustling and sometimes fraudulent trade exists for these items. Just as the apothecaries sold fake mummy powder, relic mongers sold bones of dubious origin to desperate believers. That piece of St. Peter's finger you just venerated, it might very well have come from a chicken. But God and the saints are not the only unseen forces that govern your health. The university-trained physician, for all his talk of humours, also puts his faith in the stars. Astrology is not some fringe belief. It is considered a legitimate and essential branch of medical science. Before any significant procedure, like the one you just endured, a good physician would consult an astrological chart. He would study the position of the planets and the moon to determine the most auspicious moment for the first cut. A key tool for this is the zodiac man, or Homo signorum, a diagram you would find in many medical texts. This illustration of a human body shows each part being ruled by a sign of the zodiac. Aries, the ram, governs the head. Taurus, the bull, rules the neck and throat. Leo, the lion, holds dominion over the heart. It continues all the way down to Pisces, the fish, ruling the feet. The moon's journey through these signs was of critical importance. A surgeon would be mad to operate on your eyes when the moon was in Aries, or attempt your bladder stone surgery when it was passing through Scorpio, which governed the groin. To cut into a body part when it was under the direct influence of its ruling sign was to invite disaster. It's a marvel of cosmic scheduling. ensuring you don't accidentally get your liver looked at on a day when Jupiter is in a bad mood. Historians still argue about how literally this was all taken. Was the practice of medical astrology a core diagnostic belief, or was it a form of sophisticated intellectual window dressing, a way for the physician to show off his erudition and justify his high fees? The patient, of course, isn't inclined to question it. The idea that his recovery is aligned with the majestic clockwork of the cosmos is profoundly comforting. But what if the church, the physician, and the stars all fail you? There is one last resort found not in a cathedral or a university, but in a smoky hut on the edge of the village. You turn to the cunning man or the wise woman. This is the realm of folk magic. They offer remedies that predate Christianity and operate outside the neat logic of humoral theory. They work with charms, amulets, and ancient incantations. To help your wound heal, the wise woman might instruct your mother to gather cobwebs and press them into the wound, while chanting a specific verse to bind the flesh. She might sell you an amulet, perhaps a piece of wood from a lightning-struck tree or a fossil known as a toadstone, to be worn around your neck to ward off evil spirits and bad air. This isn't just a quirky superstition. For many, it's a deeply held belief, a written charm, perhaps the word abracadabra written in a decreasing triangle on parchment, might be folded up and sewn into your clothes, a silent, secret piece of magic working on your behalf. And so, here you lie. You are a convergence of every medical belief of the age. A barber surgeon's bandage is on your wound. An apothecary's herbal paste sits half-finished by your bed. The priest's prayers echo in your ears. An astrological chart dictating your fate may be tucked into the physician's notes. And a small, strange-smelling pouch, a charm from the village wise woman, might be hidden beneath your pillow. You have been treated physically, spiritually, celestially, and magically. There is nothing left to do now but drift, floating in this sea of contradictory and overlapping cures, and let the slow, heavy wheel of the night turn. You close your eyes. You have placed your faith in everything. Now you wait for morning.